Take a deep breath now, slowly and fully. Feel it fill your chest, your ribs, your quiet heart. Find the way you wish to listen, resting, reclining, or sitting in still awareness. Let comfort find you. We spend much of life moving from one thing to the next, thought to thought, task to task. But Zen reminds us that peace hides not in the doing, but in the pause between all things. These stories live in that pause. They are not meant to be solved or remembered, but to be felt. If you wish, share where you're listening from, or what you hope to rediscover tonight. Maybe patience, maybe calm, maybe a truth you once knew, but forgot. The pause has already begun, and now we begin the story together. A young man named Tetsu came to study with a famous Zen master named Bankei. Tetsu had read many books about Buddhism and philosophy. He arrived full of questions, eager to test his understanding against the master's wisdom. On his first day, Bankei asked Tetsu, "What do you know about Zen?" Tetsu was ready for this question. He began to explain the concepts he had learned: emptiness, Buddha nature, the middle way, non-duality. He spoke for 20 minutes, demonstrating his knowledge, occasionally glancing at Bankei to see if the master was impressed. When Tetsu finally finished, Bankei said simply, "What else?" Tetsu was confused. "What do you mean, what else?" "You've told me what you know about Zen. Now tell me what you don't know." "Well," Tetsu hesitated. This wasn't a question he had prepared for. "I suppose there are advanced teachings I haven't encountered yet, and practical applications I'm still learning." "That's not what I asked," Bankei said. "I asked what you don't know. Not what you haven't learned yet, but what you genuinely don't know and recognize as unknowable." Tetsu was silent. He had spent years accumulating knowledge, thinking that was the path to wisdom. The idea of deliberately acknowledging what he didn't know felt like admitting defeat. "Come back tomorrow," Bankei said, "with a list of everything you don't know." Tetsu spent all evening trying to complete this impossible assignment. Every time he wrote "I don't know X," he would realize that he did know something about X, or could figure it out, or could look it up. By midnight, his page was blank. He couldn't genuinely claim not to know anything because he could always imagine ways to know it. The next morning, he returned to Bankei with empty hands. "I couldn't make the list." "Why not?" "Because I kept finding that I could know things, or learn things, or figure things out. I couldn't find anything I genuinely don't know." Bankei smiled. "Then you've learned nothing from your books. Because the wisest people are the ones who understand the vastness of what they don't know. Knowledge is a small island in an ocean of mystery. The more you know, the more coastline you have touching that ocean, the more you realize how much is unknown. But you've built your island and convinced yourself it's the whole world." He gestured for Tetsu to sit. "Tell me something simple. Why does the sun rise each morning?" "Because of the Earth's rotation," Tetsu answered confidently. "And why does the Earth rotate?" "Because of physics, angular momentum from the solar system's formation." "And why does the universe have these laws of physics rather than different ones?" Tetsu opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. "You see?" Bankei said gently. 3 questions deep, and we've reached mystery. You can describe what happens, but you can't explain why it happens, why existence is this way rather than some other way. Behind every answer is a deeper question, and eventually we reach the ground of not knowing. He poured tea for both of them. The problem with collecting knowledge is that it makes you think you understand. You learn the names of things, the explanations, the theories, and you mistake the map for the territory. You think because you can explain how a flower grows, you understand the flower, but you don't. The mystery of existence, of consciousness, of why there's something rather than nothing, this remains completely unknown no matter how much you learn. Tetsu felt something loosening in his chest. So all my study was worthless? Not worthless, Bankei replied, but incomplete. Knowledge without the humility of not knowing is just cleverness. It makes you think you've arrived when you've barely begun the journey. The real beginning of wisdom is when you stop pretending to know and start genuinely inquiring into what you don't know and can't know. Over the following months, Tetsu's approach to learning changed completely. Instead of trying to know everything, he practiced living with mystery. Instead of collecting answers, he sat with questions. Instead of explaining away wonder, he let himself be filled with it. He discovered that not knowing wasn't weakness or ignorance. It was openness. It was the beginner's mind that could see things freshly. It was the humility that made real learning possible. Years later, when Tetsu had students of his own, they would sometimes come to him full of questions, wanting answers to everything. And Tetsu would smile and ask, "What do you really want to know?" "Everything," they would say. And Tetsu would reply, "Then start by knowing that you know nothing. That the mystery is vast and you're a brief candle trying to illuminate infinity. Let that not knowing be your teacher. It's more honest than any answer I could give you. Tonight, let yourself not know. You don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to understand your life completely. You don't have to know why things happen or what it all means. You can rest in mystery, in not knowing, in the simple presence of being alive, without needing to explain it. The wisest rest comes not from having all the answers, but from being comfortable with questions that have no answers. Let yourself not know. That's where wisdom begins. In a coastal village where dangerous rocks lurked beneath the waves, there stood a lighthouse that had saved countless ships from destruction. The lighthouse keeper was a man named Tomo, who had tended the light faithfully for 20 years, never missing a night, never letting the beacon fail. Tomo took great pride in his work. Each evening as he lit the lamp, he would think about the ships that would see his light and know where the safe passage lay. He imagined grateful sailors steering clear of the rocks because of his vigilance. His purpose was clear, his contribution visible, his worth measured in ships that arrived safely rather than wrecking on the shore. But then came a period in Tomo's life when everything fell apart. His wife died after a long illness. His adult son, with whom he'd been close, moved to a distant city and rarely wrote. His closest friend in the village passed away suddenly. Within the span of 6 months, Tomo lost everyone who mattered most to him. He fell into a deep despair. He no longer felt the satisfaction he once had in his work. The lighthouse seemed meaningless, his life empty, his purpose hollow. He felt lost, as if he were stumbling through darkness with no light to guide him, no sense of direction, no hope that things would improve. Yet, despite his inner darkness, Tomo continued to light the lighthouse every night. It was a habit, a duty, the automatic continuation of what he had always done. But there was no joy in it anymore, no sense of meaning. He lit the lamp because that's what lighthouse keepers do, not because he felt it mattered. He would stand in the lamp room at night, watching the light sweep across the dark water, and think, I'm supposed to be the one providing light, but I'm drowning in darkness. I'm supposed to guide others to safety, but I'm completely lost in myself. What right do I have to stand here pretending to know the way when I can't find my own path? One stormy night, as Tomo stood in the lamp room feeling particularly hopeless, there was a knock at the lighthouse door. He descended to find a sailor, soaking wet, nearly hypothermic, who had been thrown from his ship when a wave swept over the deck. I saw your light, the sailor gasped as Tomo pulled him inside. I was in the water, being pulled toward the rocks. I thought I was going to die. Then I saw your light, and I swam toward it. Your light saved my life. Tomoe brought the man warm clothes, hot tea, and blankets. As the sailor recovered by the fire, he kept repeating his gratitude. If your light hadn't been there, I would have been smashed against the rocks. I couldn't see anything else, but I could see your light. It showed me which way to swim. After the sailor left the next morning, rescued by his ship, which had returned looking for him, Tomo sat for a long time thinking about what had happened. He had been so focused on his own inner darkness that he had forgotten what his light actually did. It didn't require him to feel enlightened. It didn't need him to be free of darkness himself. It just needed to shine. The sailor didn't care that the lighthouse keeper was lost and grieving. The sailor didn't need Tomo to have all the answers or to be living a perfect life. The sailor just needed the light to be there, marking the safe passage, showing where the dangers were. A Zen monk who lived at the village had heard about the rescued sailor. He came to visit Tomo at the lighthouse. I've noticed you've been struggling, the monk said gently. Since your losses, I see the darkness in you. Tomo nodded, too tired to pretend otherwise. I light this beacon every night, but I feel like a fraud. How can I guide others when I'm lost myself? How can I provide light when I'm full of darkness? The monk looked up at the lamp tower. Does the lighthouse need to understand navigation to be useful? Does it need to have sailed all the seas to show where the rocks are? Does it need to feel happy and fulfilled to save lives? No, Tomo admitted. It just needs to shine. Exactly, the monk said. You think your inner darkness disqualifies you from helping others, but actually, your willingness to keep the light burning despite your darkness makes your service even more valuable. You're not helping others because you have everything figured out. You're helping them because you do what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel. He touched Tomo's shoulder. Many people believe they can't help others until they're completely healed themselves. Until they've solved all their problems, found all their answers, achieved enlightenment or happiness or wholeness. But if everyone waited until they were completely well before helping others, no one would ever help anyone. We're all broken in some way. We're all stumbling in the darkness of one kind or another, but we can still hold lights for each other. Tomo felt something shift inside him. "You're saying I can be lost and still guide others?" "You already are," the monk replied. "You've been doing it every night. Your grief, your despair, your sense of being lost, none of that prevented the light from shining. None of that stopped you from doing what needed to be done. You think you're a fraud because you're suffering while helping others. But actually, you're demonstrating something important. Service doesn't require personal perfection. It requires showing up and doing what needs to be done." Over the following weeks, Tomo began to see his work differently. He was still grieving. He still felt lost much of the time. The darkness inside him hadn't disappeared. But he understood now that his inner state didn't invalidate his outer contribution. Ships still needed guidance. The light still saved lives. His pain didn't make the light less bright. He thought about all the people who probably felt as he did, broken, lost, inadequate, questioning their right to help others when they themselves were struggling. How many people stopped offering their gifts because they felt they weren't whole enough, healed enough, enlightened enough? A young woman from the village came to him one day troubled. She was training to be a healer, but felt overwhelmed by her own anxieties and doubts. "How can I help heal others when I'm so broken myself?" she asked. Tomo took her up to the lamp room and showed her the light. This lighthouse doesn't need to be whole to be useful. It just needs to do its job. You don't need to have conquered all your fears and healed all your wounds to help others. You just need to offer what you can offer. Your brokenness doesn't disqualify you from service. Sometimes it actually makes you better at it because you understand suffering from the inside. He told her about the sailor he had saved while feeling completely lost. "The sailor didn't need me to be happy. He needed me to keep the light on. The people you help won't need you to be perfect. They'll need you to offer your skills, your compassion, your presence, whatever you're capable of giving. And you can give those things even while you're struggling." Word spread about the lighthouse keeper's teaching. People who had been holding back from helping others because of their own problems began to reconsider. The teacher who was battling depression realized she could still teach well, that her students didn't need her to be joyful, just knowledgeable and present. The counselor struggling with his own failed marriage recognized he could still help other couples, that his challenges didn't erase his insights. The mentor, dealing with doubt about his own life choices, saw that he could still guide younger people. That uncertainty about his own path didn't prevent him from illuminating options for others. Tomoe's grief gradually softened over time. Years passed, and while he never stopped missing his wife and feeling the absence of his son, the acute pain dulled into a quieter sadness. The darkness inside him became less consuming, but he never forgot the lesson of that period, that he had kept the light burning through his darkest time, that ships had been saved even while he felt lost, that his inner darkness hadn't stopped the outward light. One evening, many years later, an old sailor came to the lighthouse. "Do you remember me?" the sailor asked. "You saved my life 20 years ago. I was thrown overboard in a storm. I saw your light and swam to it." Tomoe did remember. That was the night I needed most to know that what I was doing mattered. "Well, it mattered," the sailor said. "I went on to have a family. 3 children, 7 grandchildren now, All of them exist because you kept that light burning. And you know what I learned that night? I learned that when you're drowning in darkness, you don't need someone who has all the answers. You just need someone who's holding a light, even if they're struggling to hold it, even if they're not sure why they're bothering. You just need the light. It doesn't matter if the keeper is lost. It matters that the light is there. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider what lights you've been withholding because you feel too broken to offer them. What help have you refused to give because you don't feel qualified, whole, or enlightened enough? What guidance have you withheld because you yourself feel lost? You don't need to have everything figured out to help someone else. You don't need to be healed completely to offer healing. You don't need to be free of darkness to hold light for others. The lighthouse keeper's inner darkness didn't stop ships from being saved. Your inner struggles don't invalidate the contribution you can make. Keep your light burning, even in your dark nights. Not because you're perfect, but because someone out there is swimming in darkness toward whatever light they can find. Your light might be the one that saves them. And it doesn't matter that you feel lost. It only matters that you're still showing up, still doing what you can do, still offering what you can offer. Rest now in the understanding that you can be broken and still be useful, lost and still guide others, full of darkness and still provides light. The lighthouse doesn't need to understand the journey to mark the safe passage. It just needs to keep shining. So do you. Your inner darkness doesn't disqualify you from helping others. Sometimes it's what qualifies you most, because you understand what it's like to need a light in the darkness. Sleep now, lighthouse keeper, knowing that even in your darkest nights, your light has been saving lives. It always has been. It always will be. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. In the mountains far from any town, there lived a hermit named Ryanan who had retreated from society to live in solitude. He had built a small hut beside a stream and spent his days in meditation, contemplation, and simple living. He sought no company, spoke to no one, desired only silence and solitude. Ryanan had not always been a hermit. For many years, he had lived in the capital city, working as a scholar at a prestigious academy. He had been surrounded by people constantly, engaged in endless conversations, debates, and social obligations. His days were filled with meetings, his evenings with gatherings, his mind always occupied with the opinions and expectations of others. He had been respected in those days, successful by any measure, but he had felt increasingly hollow, as if the constant engagement with others was somehow preventing him from engaging with himself. Every conversation pulled him outward. Every social obligation demanded he present a certain face, play a certain role. He began to feel like a performer in his own life, never quite sure who he was beneath all the performances. So one day, without announcement or explanation, Ryanan left. He walked away from his position, his reputation, his comfortable life, and disappeared into the mountains. He wanted only to be alone, to find in solitude what he had lost in society. For the first year, he lived in complete isolation. He built his hut with his own hands, slowly and carefully, in no particular hurry. He learned to grow simple vegetables. He learned the rhythms of the mountain, the patterns of weather, and the habits of the animals who shared the forest. He sat in meditation for hours each day, not trying to achieve anything, just sitting with the silence. The silence was difficult at first. His mind was so accustomed to constant stimulation that it created its own noise, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, filling the quiet with internal chatter. But gradually, over months, the internal noise began to settle. Gaps appeared between thoughts. The silence became less empty and more full, filled with the subtle sounds of wind in trees, water over stones, his own breathing. Ryanan found that in this silence, he could hear things he had never heard before. Not voices or supernatural sounds, but deeper truths about himself and about life. Insights would arise naturally, not from thinking or reasoning, but from simply being present. He began to understand things he had studied for years, but never really grasped. The difference between knowledge and wisdom. The difference between being alone and being lonely. The difference between silence and emptiness. But something strange began to happen. The more Ryanan retreated into solitude, the more visitors he attracted. At first, it was just a wandering monk who happened upon his hut and asked for water. Ryanan gave him water, and the monk went on his way. But somehow, word spread. There was a hermit in the mountains, someone who had given up the world, someone who lived in complete simplicity and silence. People began to seek him out. They would make the long journey up the mountain path, arriving at his hut with questions, seeking wisdom, wanting to learn from this man who had withdrawn from society. At first, Ryanan was dismayed. He had come to the mountains precisely to escape people, to be alone. When he saw visitors approaching, he would hide inside his hut, waiting for them to leave. But they wouldn't leave. They would sit outside his door, sometimes for days, patient and persistent. Eventually, Ryanan realized that hiding was pointless. These people had traveled far to see him. The least he could do was acknowledge them. So he began to receive visitors, though reluctantly. He would listen to their questions and offer what responses came to him. He never tried to be wise or profound. He simply spoke from his experience of solitude and silence. The puzzling thing was that the more plainly he spoke, the more wisdom people found in his words. When he'd lived in the city, surrounded by people, busy with social obligations and scholarly debates, no one had sought his wisdom particularly. He had been respected, certainly, but not sought out as a teacher. Now that he had nothing to say and no desire to teach, people traveled great distances to hear from him. One day, he asked a visitor directly, "Why do you come here?" "I was a scholar once, surrounded by books and ideas and other learned people. No one traveled to seek my wisdom then. Now I live in a hut in the mountains. I've read no books in years, and I have no new ideas to offer. Why travel so far to talk to someone who has nothing to give you?" The visitor, a merchant named Taro, who had closed his business for a week to make this journey, thought carefully before answering. "In town," Taro said, "everyone is so busy talking that no one is listening. Everyone has so many ideas, so many opinions, so much they want to say that there's no space for wisdom to emerge. Conversations are just people waiting for their turn to speak, not actually hearing each other. You're different. You have silence. You have space. When you speak, even just a few words, they matter because they come from stillness rather than from the noise of a busy mind." He shifted his position on the ground where they sat. "And there's something else. In the city, I'm surrounded by people, but I feel more alone than you probably do here in your solitude. Everyone wants something from me. They want my money, my influence, my agreement, my approval. Every conversation has an agenda. But you want nothing from me. You didn't ask me to come here. You gain nothing from talking to me. That makes your words trustworthy. I can actually hear them because I'm not wondering what you're trying to get from me. Another visitor, a young woman named Hana, who had been struggling with the question of whether to marry a man her family had chosen, explained her reason for coming. Everyone in my life has an opinion about what I should do, she said. My parents think I should marry this man because it's a good match for the family. My friends think I should refuse because I don't love him. Everyone is so certain, so full of advice, so ready to tell me the right answer. But you're the first person who didn't immediately tell me what to do. You just listened. And in that listening, in that space you created, I could finally hear my own wisdom. The answer was in me all along, but I couldn't hear it over everyone else's voices. Ryonan began to understand. It wasn't despite his solitude that people sought him out, but because of it. In his withdrawal from society, he had created something increasingly rare. Space, silence, presence unburdened by agenda or expectation. And people were drawn to that the way thirsty travelers are drawn to water in the desert. He noticed something else too. The wisdom people attributed to him wasn't really his wisdom at all. It emerged from the silence he had cultivated. In the stillness of his solitary life, he could hear things that the noise of society drowned out. He could see clearly because his vision wasn't constantly pulled in multiple directions. He could speak truthfully because he had no reputation to protect, no social position to defend, no need to appear wise or knowledgeable. In the city, he had been so concerned with how others perceived him, with maintaining his scholarly reputation, with not saying anything foolish, that his words had been calculated and careful. Now, with no one to impress and nothing to lose, he simply said what was true. And paradoxically, this made his words more valuable. A scholar from the academy where Ryonan had once taught made the journey to see him. The scholar, a man named Masao, who had been Ryonan's colleague, couldn't understand why Ryonan had left such a prestigious position. "You were brilliant," Masao said. "You could have become the head of the academy. You could have written books that would have been studied for generations. Instead, you're here in a hut in the mountains, accomplishing nothing. Don't you feel you've wasted your potential?" Ryonan smiled. "When I was at the academy, I was surrounded by brilliant people, impressive ideas, important work. But I felt empty. I was always performing, always trying to prove something, always concerned with how others judged me and my ideas. Here, I accomplish nothing by the world's standards, but I'm not empty anymore." "But you could have influenced so many people from that position," Masao protested. "I influence more people now," Ryonan replied quietly. "Not through my scholarship or my position, but through my presence. People come here seeking something they can't find in the busy world, and I can offer it to them precisely because I've stepped out of that busy world. If I had stayed at the academy, I would have had a position and a reputation, but I wouldn't have had what these people are seeking." Masao looked uncomfortable. What exactly are they seeking? Space, Ryanan said. Silence. Someone who will listen without agenda. Someone who isn't trying to convince them of anything or get anything from them. Someone who has stepped out of the endless competition and comparison and striving that fills the world. I couldn't offer that while I was still caught up in it myself. He gestured to the quiet forest around them. This solitude isn't empty, as you seem to think. It's full of attention, presence, awareness. When you're constantly busy, constantly engaged, constantly consuming information and experience and interaction, there's no space for anything deeper to emerge. You fill your life so completely with activity that wisdom has nowhere to appear. But when you create space, when you embrace solitude even briefly, wisdom has room to arise. Masao stayed for 3 days, and during that time, something shifted in him. The first day, he kept trying to debate and discuss, to engage Ryanan in the kind of intellectual sparring they had done at the academy. But Ryanan wouldn't engage. He would simply sit in silence, or make tea, or suggest they walk in the forest. At first, Masao found this frustrating, but by the second day, he began to notice something. His mind, which was usually so busy with thoughts and arguments and analyses, was beginning to quiet. In the space Ryanan created through his silence, Masao's own deeper thoughts could finally surface. By the third day, Masao understood. "You're teaching me even though you're not saying much of anything," he said. "The teaching is in the space itself, in the silence. I can hear my own wisdom because you're not filling all the space with yours." Ryanan nodded. "At the academy, we competed to be the most impressive speaker, the most brilliant thinker. We filled every silence with words, every space with ideas. But wisdom doesn't emerge from fullness. It emerges from emptiness. The sage isn't the one with the most to say, but the one who creates space for what needs to be heard." Years passed, and Ryanan's hut became something of a pilgrimage site. But he never encouraged this. He never advertised his presence or claimed any special wisdom. He simply continued living as he had been, in solitude and silence, receiving those who came to him but never seeking them out. One day, a young man arrived who reminded Ryanan of himself many years ago. The young man was ambitious, successful, recognized in his field, but he was also hollow, exhausted, playing a role rather than living a life. "Should I give it all up?" the young man asked. "Should I leave society like you did?" Ryanan looked at him carefully. "Why would you do that?" "Because you found peace here. You found wisdom. Maybe I need to become a hermit too." "I didn't find peace because I became a hermit," Ryanan said. "I became a hermit because I needed to find peace and I couldn't find it in the busy world. But the lesson isn't that everyone should flee to the mountains. The lesson is about creating space, cultivating silence, stepping back from constant busyness and engagement. You can do that without leaving society." He poured tea for both of them. Some people need to physically retreat to learn solitude. Others can cultivate it right in the middle of the busy world. The external form matters less than the internal reality. What matters is whether you create space in your life for silence, for reflection, for listening to deeper wisdom. Whether you do that in a hut on a mountain or in a house in a city, the principle is the same. The young man looked disappointed. "So you're not going to tell me to become a hermit?" I'm going to tell you to become familiar with solitude, Rhiannon replied. To learn to be alone without being lonely. To create spaces in your busy life where you're not consuming, not producing, not performing, just being. Maybe that means taking a walk alone each day. Maybe it means sitting in silence for an hour each morning. Maybe it means turning off all your devices for one day a week and just being present to yourself and to life. The specific form doesn't matter. What matters is that you stop filling every moment with activity and create space for something deeper to emerge. He looked out at the forest. People come here thinking I have some special wisdom to give them. But all I really offer is space and silence. And they discover that in that space, their own wisdom can finally be heard. The wisdom was always there. It was just drowned out by noise and busyness. Solitude doesn't create wisdom. It reveals the wisdom that was hidden. The young man stayed for a week, and each day Rhiannon gave him less and less instruction. By the end of the week, they would sit together for hours without speaking, just being present to the silence and to each other. And the young man found that these silent hours taught him more than all the words he had heard in years of seeking teachers and reading books. When he left, he thanked Rhiannon. I thought you would teach me something. Instead, you showed me how to hear what I already knew. That's the only teaching worth giving, Rhiannon replied. As more years passed, Rhiannon noticed an interesting pattern. The people who traveled to see him once rarely came back. It wasn't that they were disappointed, but rather that they had learned what they needed to learn. They had experienced solitude, discovered their own inner wisdom, and carried that back to their lives. They didn't need to keep returning because the teaching wasn't dependent on his physical presence. It was about a principle they could apply anywhere. A few visitors did return, usually in times of crisis or transition, and Rhiannon always received them, but he noticed that these return visits were shorter. The people knew now how to create their own space, their own silence. They came not because they needed him specifically, but because his hut represented a physical manifestation of the inner solitude they were learning to cultivate. One day, an old friend from his academy days came to visit. This friend, whose name was Kenji, had become the head of the academy, achieving the position Rhiannon could have had. He arrived looking exhausted, burdened by responsibility and expectation. I've achieved everything we once talked about achieving, Kenji said. I have the position, the respect, the influence. So why do I feel so empty? Rhiannon recognized this emptiness. It was what he had felt all those years ago, what had driven him to the mountains. Because you have everything except space, Rhiannon said. Your life is so full of accomplishment that there's no room left for being. You've filled every moment with doing, and you've lost touch with the silence beneath all the doing. But I can't just abandon everything, Kenji protested. I have responsibilities. People depend on me. I'm not suggesting you abandon anything, Rhiannon replied. I'm suggesting you find spaces within your full life where you can be empty, even brief moments of solitude, of silence, of stopping. These moments are not wasted time. They're the moments where you reconnect with who you are beneath all your roles and responsibilities. He stood up and walked to the edge of his small clearing. I came to the mountains because I needed radical solitude to remember myself. But now I carry that solitude with me. Even when visitors are here, even when I'm engaged with others, there's a core of silence in me that remains untouched. That's what you need to find. Not external solitude necessarily, but internal solitude that you can access even in the middle of busyness. Kenji stayed for several days, and Rhiannon taught him simple practices. Sitting in silence for even 10 minutes each morning. Taking a walk alone without purpose or destination. Eating one meal a day without distraction, just noticing the food and the act of eating. Creating small pockets of solitude within a busy life. When Kenji returned to the academy, he began implementing these practices, and he found that these small moments of solitude transformed his entire experience of his busy life. He was less reactive, more present, more capable of hearing his own wisdom beneath the noise of constant demands. He wrote to Rhiannon, "I understand now what you've been teaching. Solitude isn't about being alone. It's about creating space. And that space is what allows wisdom to emerge, what allows us to hear truth, what allows us to be present rather than just constantly doing. Thank you for showing me that I didn't need to abandon my life. I just needed to find space within it." Rhiannon smiled when he read this letter. This was the real teaching. Not that everyone should become a hermit, but that everyone needs solitude in some form. Space where they're not performing, not producing, not consuming, just being. As Rhiannon grew older, he noticed that fewer visitors came, not because his reputation had diminished, but because the teaching had spread. People had learned to create their own solitude, their own silence. They didn't need to journey to a hut in the mountains because they had learned to find that mountain stillness within themselves wherever they were. One evening, as Rhiannon sat watching the sunset from his hut, he reflected on the paradox of his life. He had retreated to solitude, seeking only to be alone, and in doing so, he had touched more lives than he ever had in his busy years at the academy. By wanting nothing, he had given something valuable. By seeking no students, he had taught countless people. By embracing emptiness, he had offered fullness. The teaching wasn't really his, he realized. It was simply what emerged when space was created. The wisdom people found when they visited him wasn't his wisdom. It was their own wisdom, finally audible in the silence he created around himself. He was just a mirror, reflecting back to people what they already knew but had forgotten in the noise of their busy lives. Tonight, as you rest, you're entering into solitude. Not the solitude of a hermit in the mountains, but the solitude of sleep, of withdrawal from the day's engagements, of stepping back from constant doing into simple being. In this solitude, you might find what busy people seek from hermits: space where your own wisdom can be heard, silence where truth can emerge, emptiness where fullness becomes apparent. You don't need to travel to mountains or build a hut or give up your life. You just need to create moments like this one. Moments where you stop filling every space with activity and allow silence to speak. The wisdom you're seeking isn't somewhere else. It's here in you, waiting to be heard. But it can only be heard in silence, in solitude, in the space you create by ceasing to be constantly busy. Rest now in the solitude of this moment. Let the silence teach you. Let the space fill you. What you've been seeking in all your busy engagement with the world is here, has always been here, waiting in the quiet. Solitude doesn't attract wisdom from outside. It reveals the wisdom that was always inside, just waiting for space to emerge. Be still, be silent, be empty, and discover that emptiness is the fullness you've been seeking all along. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. In a coastal city, there lived a renowned mapmaker named Genji, who had charted more territory than any cartographer of his generation. His maps were detailed, accurate, and highly sought after by merchants, explorers, and military leaders. Every island, every coastline, every mountain range he documented was rendered with precision. But Genji had a practice that other mapmakers mocked. Whenever his knowledge ended, whenever he reached the limits of what had been explored and documented, he would leave the map blank. Large white spaces appeared on his charts, marked only with the words "unknown territory," or sometimes just left empty. Other mapmakers found this approach unprofessional. They would fill in the blank spaces with speculation, with reports from unreliable sources, with educated guesses. A map should be complete, they would argue. Blank spaces make it look unfinished. Blank spaces are honest, Genji would reply. They tell the truth, that we don't know what's there. Filling them with guesses tells a lie, that we do know. But the criticism stung, especially when clients would choose other mapmakers' complete maps over Genji's honest but incomplete ones. People wanted certainty, even false certainty. They wanted maps that told them what lay everywhere, even if those maps were partly fiction. One season, a wealthy merchant named Ichiro commissioned Genji to create a map for a trading expedition to distant islands. When Genji delivered the map, Ichiro was dismayed by the large blank areas. "What am I supposed to do with this?" Ichiro complained. "I need to know what's in these blank spaces. I need to plan my route." "What's in those spaces is unknown," Genji replied. "No reliable expedition has charted them. I can't tell you what I don't know." "But other mapmakers have filled in these areas," Ichiro protested. "They show islands, harbors, channels." "Based on speculation," Genji said. "Based on second-hand rumors and wishful thinking. If you sail using those maps, you'll be navigating by fantasy. My blank spaces at least tell you where certainty ends." Ichiro hired a different map maker who provided a complete map with no blank spaces. The expedition set sail using this fully detailed chart, confident in their route. 3 months later, the expedition returned, having lost 2 ships. They had found islands where the map showed open ocean, encountered reefs where the map showed safe passage, and wasted weeks exploring channels that didn't exist. The complete map had been worse than useless. It had been dangerous. Ichiro returned to Genji, chastened. "Your blank spaces would have saved lives. If I had known we were entering unknown territory, I would have proceeded cautiously. Instead, I trusted a map that pretended to know, and that false certainty led to disaster." Blank spaces scare people, Genji acknowledged. They remind us how much we don't know, how limited our understanding is. But pretending we know more than we do is worse than admitting our ignorance. The blank space says, "Be careful here. Proceed thoughtfully. Don't assume." The falsely filled space says, "It's safe to trust this," which is a dangerous lie. Word spread about Ichiro's disaster, and Genji's honest maps. More clients began to value the blank spaces, recognizing them as marks of integrity rather than incompleteness. They learned to read Genji's maps differently. The detailed areas showed where knowledge was reliable. The blank areas showed where caution was needed. A young apprentice named Lin came to study with Genji. She had been trained by other mapmakers who filled in all spaces, and she struggled with Genji's insistence on leaving blanks. "But we can make educated guesses," Lin argued. "We know the general geography of the region. We can estimate where islands are likely to be." "And we'd be wrong half the time," Genji replied. "An educated guess isn't knowledge. It's speculation with a fancy name. If you mark speculation as if it's fact, you're lying to whoever uses your map." He spread out several maps on his table, his own with its blank spaces, and competitors' maps of the same regions with every space filled. These complete maps look more professional, more finished. But which is more honest? Which better serves someone trusting their life to the information? Lin began to understand, but still she resisted. People don't want to be told we don't know. They want answers, even imperfect ones. Then they want comforting lies rather than uncomfortable truths, Genji said. And it's not our job to provide comforting lies. Our job is to chart what's known and clearly mark what's not. The blank space is information. It tells you something important. Here be dragons, or at least here be unknowns. Proceed carefully. Over time, Lin learned to value the blank spaces. She discovered that leaving areas blank required as much skill as filling them in. You had to know exactly where certainty ended, had to resist the temptation to extend your knowledge beyond its actual limits, and had to be comfortable with admitting you didn't have all the answers. One day, an explorer returned from a region Genji had left blank on his maps. The explorer had detailed charts of what was actually there. "Your blank space wasn't really blank," the explorer said, showing Genji islands and coastlines that had been unknown before. "Now it's not blank," Genji agreed, carefully adding the new information to his map. "But it was blank until you explored it. That's how honest maps work. They grow as knowledge grows, but they never pretend to knowledge we don't have." He looked at the transformed map. "See how the blank space has been replaced with detail? That's how it should happen. First honest acknowledgement of ignorance, then actual exploration, then knowledge replacing the unknown. But some map makers skip the first step and go straight to filling in spaces with imagination, which prevents anyone from recognizing what actually needs to be explored." Years later, Genji's blank spaces became the very thing that made his maps valuable. Explorers would deliberately seek out the blank spaces on Genji's maps, knowing these marked genuinely unexplored territory rather than cartographic guesswork. Military leaders trusted Genji's maps precisely because they showed where trust should end. A historian interviewing Genji late in his life asked, "Don't the blank spaces bother you? Don't you wish you could fill in all the unknown areas before you die?" "No," Genji replied without hesitation. "The blank spaces are the most honest things on my maps. They say, 'I don't know,' which is often the truest thing a person can say. I could fill them with speculation and fantasy, making maps that look complete. But I'd rather make true maps." He gestured to his life's work, hundreds of maps, all marked with careful detail where knowledge existed and honest blankness where it didn't. These blank spaces are my legacy. They're me admitting the limits of my knowledge, refusing to pretend omniscience, valuing truth over completeness. Every mapmaker who fills in the unknown with guesses is choosing ego over integrity. I choose integrity. The historian looked at a particularly large blank space on one map. Will this ever be filled in? Perhaps, Genji said. Perhaps someone will explore that region and bring back reliable information, or perhaps it will remain blank forever. Either way, my map is honest right now, which is all any map can be. The map maker who fills in that space with speculation is making a map that's dishonest right now, in the hope that by accident he might be correct later. That's not map making. That's gambling. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider the blank spaces in your own understanding. Where are you filling in unknowns with speculation, pretending certainty you don't have, telling yourself and others you know things you actually don't? What would it mean to leave those spaces blank, to honestly mark them as unknown? The blank space isn't a failure. It's honesty. It's saying, I don't know, instead of offering false certainty. It's admitting the limits of your understanding rather than pretending those limits don't exist. This feels vulnerable because we're taught that certainty is strength and uncertainty is weakness. But actually, false certainty is weakness disguised as strength, while honest uncertainty is strength willing to show itself. Rest now in your blank spaces. Let yourself not know what you don't know. Let yourself mark large areas of your life, your future, your understanding as unknown territory. This isn't an admission of failure, it's commitment to truth. The mapmaker with blank spaces serves better than the one with false completeness. So do you. Your honest I don't know is more valuable than anyone's false I'm certain. Sleep in the blank spaces tonight where truth lives. In a monastery, there was a meditation hall with a heavy wooden door that was always kept closed during practice sessions. The door had no lock, but everyone treated it as if it were locked, entering only at designated times and never leaving during meditation periods. A visiting monk named Gensho noticed this and asked why no one ever left during meditation, even though the door was clearly unlocked. It wouldn't be proper, one monk explained. During practice time, we stay in practice. Leaving would break the container, would disturb others, would show a lack of discipline. But you could leave if you wanted to, Gensho asked. Technically, yes, but we don't. Gensho found this fascinating. These monks were living as if imprisoned during meditation sessions, but the prison existed only in their minds. The door was open. They could leave any time, yet they sat as if bound. He began to notice similar patterns throughout the monastery. People living within invisible constraints, following rules that had no enforcement mechanism, restricting themselves to prisons that had no walls. One day, during a particularly long meditation session, Gensho stood up, walked to the door, opened it, stepped outside into the sunlight, and then walked back in and sat down. The other monks were shocked by this violation of protocol. Afterward, the abbot called Gensho to his chambers. Why did you leave during meditation? To see if I could, Gensho replied, to test whether the constraint was real or imagined. It was imagined. The door was never locked. I was never actually trapped. I was sitting there by choice, not by compulsion. But we all know we could leave, the abbot said. The point is that we choose not to. Do you really know that? Gensho asked. Or have you assumed for so long that you shouldn't leave that you've forgotten you have a choice? There's a difference between staying by conscious choice and staying by habit or assumed constraint. One is freedom. The other is just a comfortable prison. This question disturbed many monks. They began to realize they had been treating many choices as if they were requirements. They had been living within restrictions that no one was actually enforcing. They had imprisoned themselves with beliefs about what they should or shouldn't do. The abbot considered Gensho's point carefully. You're right, he admitted. We've been treating the open door as if it were locked. We've been prisoners of our own assumptions. But what do we do with this awareness? First, acknowledge it, Gensho said. See clearly that most of your constraints are chosen, not imposed. Then decide consciously. Which constraints serve you? Which do you want to keep? And which are you maintaining out of habit or fear, not because they actually help you? He gestured toward the meditation hall. That door has always been open, but if you never test that, if you never actually check whether you could leave, then you're living as if imprisoned, even though you're free. True freedom begins with recognizing which prisons are real and which are imagined. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere in the monastery changed. Monks began questioning which rules actually served their practice and which they followed out of mere habit. They discovered they had internalized many restrictions that had no actual external enforcement. One monk realized he had been afraid to speak his honest opinions for years, not because speaking was forbidden, but because he had decided early on that it was safer to stay quiet. No one had actually silenced him. He had silenced himself. Another monk discovered he had been avoiding certain foods, not because of any monastic rule, but because he had once been told they were inappropriate for monks, and he had never questioned this. The restriction existed only in his belief. A third monk realized he had been limiting his meditation practice to certain times and places, not because practice was restricted to those times, but because he had created a mental rule about when and where meditation counted. We've been living in prisons of our own making, one monk said during a group discussion. The doors were open all along. We just never tried to walk through them. Gensho nodded. Most people live this way. They believe they're trapped in circumstances, jobs, relationships, and patterns of behavior. They believe they have no choice, but often, if they examined closely, they'd discover the constraints are their own beliefs, not external reality. The door was never locked. The abbot asked, "But doesn't this lead to chaos? If everyone starts leaving meditation sessions whenever they want, ignoring the schedule, doing what they please, doesn't the structure fall apart?" Possibly, Gensho agreed. But structure maintained through unconscious compliance isn't real structure. It's just a habit pretending to be discipline. True structure comes from conscious choice. When people choose to stay, not because they believe they must, but because they genuinely want to, that's authentic practice. When they stay simply because they never questioned whether they could leave, that's just imprisonment with no walls. He looked around at the gathered monks. I'm not suggesting you abandon all structure or discipline. I'm suggesting you own your choices. Recognize that you're staying because you choose to, not because you have to. Recognize that the door is open and you're free to leave, and then decide whether to stay or go based on authentic choice rather than assumed constraint. This teaching spread beyond the monastery. People in the nearby town heard about the open door and began examining their own lives. How many constraints were they living under that existed only in their minds? How many prisons had they created for themselves? A woman realized she had been staying in an unhappy marriage not because of any real obstacle to leaving, but because of stories she told herself about what leaving would mean. When she examined these stories, she found they were beliefs, not facts. The door had always been open. A man discovered he had been working at a job he hated for years, believing he had no choice, that his family responsibilities required it. When he looked honestly, he found there were other options he had never seriously considered because he had assumed from the beginning that he was trapped. An elderly person recognized that many of the limitations they experienced weren't from age or circumstance, but from beliefs about what old people could or couldn't do. The constraints were largely self-imposed. The teaching of the open door, people began to say, is that most prisons are mental. We're free more often than we realize. The question isn't whether we can leave, but whether we've been living as if we can't. Years later, the monastery still practiced meditation with a closed door during sessions. But now there was a different quality to it. Everyone knew the door was unlocked. Everyone knew they could leave any time they chose. They stayed not from obligation or assumed constraint, but from authentic choice. The practice deepened because people were choosing it freely, rather than submitting to it from habit or fear. Gensho's simple act of walking out and back in had freed an entire community from invisible prisons. Not by tearing down structure, but by revealing that structure maintained by genuine choice is stronger than structure maintained by unconscious compliance. Tonight, as you rest, you might examine the doors in your own life. Which ones do you believe are locked? Which constraints do you accept as unchangeable? What prisons are you living in that exist only in your beliefs? The door has always been open. You've always been freer than you realized. The constraints that feel so solid are often just habits of thought, beliefs you've never questioned, stories you've told yourself for so long that you mistake them for truth. You're not as trapped as you think. You have more choices than you've acknowledged. The prison is mostly mental, and mental prisons can be walked out of the moment you realize the door was never actually locked. This doesn't mean every choice is easy or without consequences, but it means you're choosing even when you believe you have no choice. And recognizing that you're choosing is the beginning of real freedom. Rest now in the understanding that you're freer than you knew. The door is open. It's always been open. You can stay or go based on authentic choice, not on assumed necessity. This recognition doesn't require you to change anything external. It just requires you to see clearly. The constraints you live under are more permeable than you thought. You've had more freedom all along. You just haven't been exercising it. Sleep now as a free person, aware that tomorrow you can walk through any open door you choose, or stay where you are by genuine choice rather than imagined imprisonment. The freedom was always yours. Now you know it. With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. In a monastery where monks practiced intensive meditation, there was a monk named Genzo, who struggled more than any of the others. While his fellow monks seemed to make progress, reporting experiences of insight and clarity, Genzo felt nothing but confusion and exhaustion. He tried so hard. He would sit in meditation until his legs ached and his back screamed. He would concentrate fiercely, trying to force his mind into the states he read about in the sutras. He would stay up late studying, trying to understand intellectually what he couldn't grasp experientially. But nothing seemed to work. While others reported breakthrough moments, sudden insights, and powerful experiences during meditation, Genzo just felt tired. So tired that he would sometimes fall asleep during meditation sessions, which filled him with shame. The other monks were achieving enlightenment, and he couldn't even stay awake. The monastery's teacher, Master Dogen, watched Genzo's struggle with patient concern. He saw how the young monk was wearing himself out, how the desperate striving was actually creating obstacles rather than removing them. One day, after Genzo had fallen asleep during meditation yet again and woken up mortified, Dogen called him aside. "Genzo, you look exhausted. When did you last sleep a full night?" "I can't afford to sleep, Master. I'm so far behind the others. I need to practice more, not less." "Go to your room and sleep," Dogen said gently. "That's not a suggestion. It's an instruction. Sleep for as long as your body needs." Genzo was confused but obedient. He went to his room, lay down, and immediately fell into the deepest sleep he'd had in months. He slept through the afternoon, through the evening meditation, through the night, and into the next morning. When he finally woke, something was different. He couldn't name what had changed, but the world looked somehow clearer. The desperate striving that had consumed him was just gone. He felt a quietness inside that he'd never experienced before. He went to find Dogen, unsure what to say about this strange shift. "Master, something happened while I slept, but I don't know what. I feel different, but I didn't have any dramatic experience, any sudden insight. I just slept." Dogen smiled. "And in that sleep, you let go of trying. You let go of the desperate effort to achieve enlightenment. You stopped fighting with yourself. And in that letting go, what was always there became apparent." "But I didn't do anything," Genzo protested. "I just slept." "The others have profound experiences during meditation. I fell asleep." "Enlightenment isn't always dramatic," Dogen explained. "Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it comes not through effort, but through the cessation of effort. You've been trying so hard to wake up that you couldn't see you were already awake. You needed to sleep, to let go, to stop trying, for what's always been true to become obvious." Over the following days, Genzo noticed that the peace hadn't left him. It wasn't a dramatic altered state. It was more like a background quietness, a sense of okayness that didn't depend on circumstances. The desperate seeking was gone, not because he had found what he was looking for, but because he had realized he'd never lost it. Other monks asked him what had happened. "Did you have a breakthrough, a sudden awakening?" "I don't know," Genzo replied honestly. "I just slept. And when I woke up, something had shifted. But it wasn't like lightning striking. It was more like clouds clearing and realizing the sky had been there all along. Master Dogen used Genzo's experience to teach others. Many of you are waiting for dramatic enlightenment experiences. Thunder and lightning, profound insights, altered states. But enlightenment is often more subtle than that. It's the quiet recognition of what's always been true. It's the simple shift from trying to be at peace to noticing the peace that's already here. Years later, when Genzo told his story to students, he would laugh at his younger self. I was trying so hard to wake up that I exhausted myself. I thought enlightenment was something to achieve through effort. But sometimes you have to stop trying to wake up and just let yourself sleep. Sometimes awakening comes through the door you're not watching. Tonight, stop trying so hard. Stop striving for perfect meditation or ideal relaxation or correct rest. Stop watching for enlightenment or breakthroughs or special experiences. Just sleep. Just let go. Just be tired and allow yourself rest without judgment. What you're seeking might come not through your effort, but through your willingness to stop efforting and simply be. Sleep through your own awakening if you must. It will be there when you wake. There was a master calligrapher named Kenzo who had spent 40 years perfecting his craft. He could write each character with flawless precision, every stroke exactly as the ancient masters had prescribed. His work was technically perfect, exhibited in galleries, and purchased by collectors who valued his adherence to classical standards. But Kenzo had a secret dissatisfaction. Despite the praise and recognition, his work felt lifeless to him. Each piece was an exercise in replication, a demonstration of technique, but nothing more. He was copying perfection that had been established centuries ago, adding nothing of himself, discovering nothing new. One day, an important patron commissioned a piece for a temple dedication. The character to be written was Mu, meaning emptiness or void. Kenzo prepared carefully, mixing his ink to exactly the right consistency, selecting his finest brush, and setting up his workspace with meticulous attention to every detail. He had practiced this character thousands of times. He knew exactly how it should look. He visualized every stroke in his mind, preparing to execute it perfectly. But as he positioned his brush above the paper, his cat, who normally slept quietly in the corner during his work, suddenly leapt onto the table. The cat's paw hit Kenzo's arm just as he was beginning the first stroke. The brush dragged across the paper in a completely unintended direction, creating a wild, irregular mark that bore no resemblance to proper calligraphy. Kenzo's first reaction was anger. The perfect paper was ruined. Hours of preparation wasted. He would have to start over, and he was already behind schedule. He grabbed the ruined piece, intending to crumple it and throw it away, but something made him pause. He looked at the mark more carefully. The stroke was wild, yes, completely improper by classical standards. But it had an energy, a life, a spontaneous quality that none of his careful, perfect strokes ever achieved. It looked like emptiness, like void, like the very essence of mu, in a way his technically correct versions never had. The mark captured something real about emptiness, its unpredictability, its resistance to control, its indifference to our intentions. His planned perfect versions had been illustrations of the concept. This accidental mark was somehow the thing itself. Kenzo sat staring at this mistake for over an hour. Finally, he decided to build the rest of the character around it, incorporating the wild stroke instead of starting over. The final piece was unlike anything he had ever created. It combined his technical skill with this element of pure accident, planned mastery with unplanned spontaneity. When he delivered the piece to his patron, he apologized. "I must confess, this isn't what I planned. My cat interfered, and the first stroke went completely wrong. I tried to salvage the piece, but it's not traditional calligraphy. I understand if you want me to create a new one." The patron studied the work in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, "This is the finest piece you've ever created." "But it's wrong," Kenzo protested. "The first stroke violates every principle of proper form." "It's alive," the patron replied. "Your other work is beautiful, technically flawless, but it's like looking at a preserved flower. This piece is like seeing a flower growing wild. It has breath in it, spontaneity, the quality of something happening right now rather than being carefully reconstructed from the past." He hung the piece in the temple, and people came from across the region to see it. Other calligraphers studied it, trying to understand how Kenzo had achieved such vitality. Some tried to recreate the effect by deliberately making mistakes, but these forced accidents never had the same quality. The life in Kenzo's piece came from the genuineness of the accident, not from calculated imperfection. A Zen master who viewed the piece said to Kenzo, "Your cat understood something you had forgotten, that true art comes from responding to the moment, not from executing a plan. For 40 years, you've been copying the past. In one moment of accident, you created something present." "But I can't plan accidents," Kenzo said. "I can't make this happen deliberately." "Exactly," the master replied. "That's why it worked. Your planning mind, your control, your perfection, all of that had to be interrupted for something real to emerge. The cat was your teacher." From that day forward, Kenzo's approach to calligraphy changed. He still practiced technique, still maintained his skills, but he stopped trying to control every aspect of the outcome. He began leaving space for accident, for the unexpected, for the moment to contribute its own wisdom. Sometimes he would start a piece without complete preparation, letting the consistency of the ink vary, allowing the paper to be slightly wrinkled, welcoming small imperfections. Sometimes he would work faster than was comfortable, not giving himself time to calculate every movement. Sometimes he would deliberately do something unusual, breaking a rule to see what would happen. Not every piece succeeded. Many experiments failed, but the successful pieces had a quality his earlier perfect work had lacked: presence, immediacy, life. They felt like they were happening rather than being displayed. They invited the viewer into an experience rather than presenting a completed achievement. Other calligraphers criticized this departure from classical standards. Kenzo has abandoned proper technique, they said. He's making mistakes deliberately. This isn't true calligraphy. But Kenzo understood something they didn't. Technique wasn't being abandoned. It was being liberated. He had spent 40 years building technical mastery. Now he was learning what to do with that mastery, not to control and perfect, but to create conditions where truth could emerge spontaneously. The technique serves spontaneity, he would tell students. You practice until the movements are natural, until you don't have to think about them. Then you let go of trying to be perfect and allow something real to happen. The years of practice give you the skills. The letting go gives you the art. One student asked, "But how do you know when to let go? How do you know when you've practiced enough?" "You don't," Kenzo admitted. "I practiced for 40 years before my cat taught me to let go. Maybe that was too long. Maybe it wasn't long enough. The point isn't reaching some perfect amount of preparation. The point is remaining open to the moment when control needs to give way to spontaneity." He showed the student his temple piece with its wild first stroke. "I could never recreate this exactly. I could make similar pieces, but this particular mark came from this particular moment of accident. That's what makes it true. It's not a reproducible technique. It's a response to what actually happened." Years later, when Kenzo was old, he was asked to demonstrate calligraphy for the emperor. It was considered a great honor. Most calligraphers prepared extensively for such occasions, practicing for weeks to ensure a perfect demonstration. Kenzo prepared differently. He practiced just enough to be warmed up, then went to the demonstration with no fixed plan. He would respond to the moment, to the energy in the room, to whatever impulse arose. It was terrifying and exhilarating. As he stood before the emperor with brush and paper, he felt all his years of perfect control wanting to take over. The safe thing would be to execute a flawless classical piece. But instead, he paused, breathed, and let go of control. What emerged was neither perfectly planned nor completely accidental. It was something in between, technique meeting moment, skill dancing with spontaneity, the practiced hand responding to the unpracticed impulse. The character he created had both mastery and wildness, both tradition and innovation. When he finished, the emperor was silent for a moment, then said, "I have seen many demonstrations of perfect technique. This is the first time I've seen calligraphy that felt alive. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider where you're over-controlling, over-planning, and trying to perfect everything before you act. What would happen if you made space for accident, for spontaneity, for the moment to contribute its own wisdom? What if your careful plans are actually preventing something more true from emerging?" The perfect mistake teaches that life isn't lived according to plan. The most authentic moments come when planning gives way to presence, when control releases into response, when the prepared hand meets the unprepared moment. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need perfect execution. You need technique in the service of spontaneity, skill as a foundation for letting go. Rest now in the space between planning and accident, between control and release. Let yourself be like Kenzo's brush, prepared by practice, but freed from the need to be perfect. Tomorrow might bring a cat leaping onto your carefully prepared plans. Let it. The interruption might be the teacher. The accident might be the truth. The mistake might be perfect. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. In a town known for its elaborate storytelling tradition, there arrived a performer who couldn't speak. Her name was Yuki, and she had lost her voice to an illness years before. Despite this, she claimed to be a storyteller, which puzzled the townspeople. How could someone without a voice tell stories? The town's master storyteller, a man named Jiro, who was famous for his eloquent speech and powerful voice, was particularly skeptical. "Storytelling is about words," he said dismissively. "Without words, you have nothing. You're not a storyteller, you're just a mime." But the town's curiosity was strong enough that they allowed Yuki to perform one evening in the town square. Jiro attended, expecting to prove his point about the necessity of words. Yuki stepped onto the platform, wearing simple clothes, carrying no props. She stood in silence for a long moment, then began to move. Her movements were subtle at first, just small shifts in posture, gentle expressions crossing her face. But gradually, through gesture, expression, and presence, a story began to emerge. Without a single word, she conveyed a tale of loss and discovery. Her body became a person grieving, and everyone watching felt the grief. Her face showed the journey from despair to hope, and the audience traveled that journey with her. Her hands painted images in the air that everyone could see, even though nothing visible was there. The story lasted perhaps 20 minutes. When it ended, Yuki simply bowed and left the platform. The audience sat in stunned silence, many with tears running down their faces. Jiro, the master storyteller, was shaken. He had told thousands of stories in his career, using all his skill with words, all his vocal techniques. But he had never moved an audience the way Yuki just had, without saying anything at all. He approached her later. "I don't understand. How did you do that? Without words, how did you communicate so much?" Yuki took out a small board she used for writing and wrote, "Words point to truth, but words are not truth itself. I cannot use words, so I must speak the truth directly. My presence must communicate what my voice cannot." Jiro read this and sat down heavily. "I've spent my whole life mastering words. And you just showed me that words might be the least important part of storytelling." Yuki wrote again, "Words are useful, but presence is essential. You can have perfect words with no presence, and people feel nothing. You can have no words but complete presence, and people feel everything. I didn't choose to lose my voice, but losing it taught me that what I thought was essential actually wasn't." Over the following days, Jiro spent time with Yuki, learning her way of storytelling. She showed him how much could be communicated through posture, through the quality of attention, through authentic presence. She demonstrated that silence could say more than speech, that stillness could convey more than elaborate gestures. "When you use words," she wrote, "you risk people hearing the words but missing the truth behind them. They get caught in analyzing what you said, agreeing or disagreeing with your choice of words. But when you communicate through presence, there are no words to argue with. People feel the truth directly." Jiro began incorporating this into his own storytelling. He still used words, but he paid more attention to presence, to silence, to the communication that happened beyond language. His storytelling deepened, became more powerful. People said something had changed, though they couldn't quite name what. One day, a young person who couldn't speak came to the town, devastated by the belief that they could never communicate effectively. Jiro brought them to meet Yuki. "You think your inability to speak is a limitation," he told the young person. But this woman has shown me it's also an opportunity to develop forms of communication that go deeper than words, to learn to be so present that your mere being conveys what others need elaborate sentences to express. Yuki performed for the young person and afterward wrote, "I grieved my lost voice for years. I thought I had lost the essential tool for human connection, but I was wrong. Presence is the essential tool. Voice is just one way among many to express presence. You haven't lost the ability to communicate. You've been allowed to master a form of communication that speaking people often neglect. Tonight, let yourself communicate without words. Let your presence speak. In the silence of rest, convey to yourself and to the universe whatever needs to be said, without saying anything at all. Words are useful, but they're not essential. Presence is essential, and your presence right now, silent and still, communicates everything that needs to be communicated. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to explain or describe or articulate. Just be here, fully present, and let that presence be the story that's being told tonight. In a city famous for its artists, there was a renowned sculptor named Kaori who had created magnificent works for temples, palaces, and public squares throughout the land. She was known for her perfectionism, her unwillingness to declare any work complete until every detail was exactly right. At age 60, Kaori received a commission that she knew would be her masterpiece, a memorial sculpture for the city's founder. She had complete artistic freedom and unlimited time. This would be her legacy, the work by which all her other work would be judged. She began with intense focus, creating preliminary sketches, building models, and selecting the perfect stone. The first year was spent in planning. The second year is spent roughing out the basic form. By the third year, the sculpture was recognizably taking shape as a figure of dignity and strength, capturing something essential about leadership and vision. But as the sculpture neared completion, something strange happened. Kaori couldn't finish it. Every time she thought she was done, she would see another adjustment to make, another detail to refine, another element that wasn't quite right. The nose could be more precise, the hands could be more expressive, the drapery could flow more naturally. Years passed. The sculpture stood in her studio, nearly complete, but never quite complete enough. City officials would visit, would ask when they might see the finished work, and Kaori would assure them it was almost ready, just a few more refinements needed. 10 years after beginning the project, Kaori was still working on the same sculpture. It had gone through countless iterations. Areas she had refined years earlier, she would redo, claiming her skills had improved, and she could do better now. The sculpture had become an obsession, a project that consumed her life but never reached completion. A young sculptor named Isamu, who admired Kaori's earlier work, came to apprentice with her. He expected to learn from watching a master complete her masterpiece. Instead, he found an old woman trapped in endless refinement, unable to stop working on a sculpture that had been nearly done for years. "Why don't you declare it finished?" Isamu finally asked, after watching Kaori rework the same hand for the third time since he arrived. "Because it's not perfect yet," Kaori replied. "I can see the ideal form in my mind. This stone version still falls short. I need to keep working until the stone matches the vision." But will it ever match? Isamu asked gently. Will the real sculpture ever match the perfect one in your imagination? Kaori had no answer. She had never asked herself this question. She had always assumed that with enough work, enough refinement, enough time, she could make the physical sculpture match her mental ideal. A Zen teacher named Etsuko, who had known Kaori for decades, visited the studio. She looked at the nearly complete sculpture with a sad expression. "You're destroying it," Etsuko said. "I'm perfecting it," Kaori protested. "No, you're overworking it. The sculpture lost its life years ago when you couldn't stop refining it. Now it's becoming tight, over-controlled, anxious. I can see your perfectionism in every surface. The early spontaneity is gone, replaced by compulsive detail." She touched the sculpture gently. Completion doesn't mean achieving perfection. It means recognizing when continuing diminishes rather than improves. This sculpture was probably finished 5 years ago, but you couldn't see it because you were comparing it to an impossible ideal rather than accepting it as the real thing it actually was. Kaori wanted to argue, but she knew Etsuko was right. She looked at her sculpture with honest eyes for the first time in years. It was beautiful in parts, overworked in others. The areas she had refined most recently were actually worse than earlier versions. Too controlled, too fussy, too perfect. The sculpture had lost its breath somewhere along the way. "How do I know when something is done?" Kaori asked quietly. "How do I distinguish between stopping because it's complete and stopping because I've given up?" "You feel it," Etsuko replied. "True completion has a quality of rightness, even if the work isn't perfect. Giving up has a quality of defeat. But what you're doing now is neither completion nor giving up. It's compulsive continuation, working past the point where work helps. That's different from both completion and abandonment." She looked at Kaori directly. The sculpture should have been installed in the city square years ago, where people would appreciate it. Instead, it's trapped in your studio, being endlessly refined toward an ideal it will never reach. You're preventing it from serving its purpose because you can't accept that it's good enough. That's not dedication to excellence. That's fear disguised as perfectionism. This truth landed hard. Kaori realized she had been afraid to finish the sculpture, afraid to have it judged, afraid it wouldn't live up to her reputation. As long as it remained unfinished in her studio, it remained perfect in potential. Once completed and installed, it would be real, subject to criticism, limited by its actual qualities rather than protected by its imagined ones. "I've been hiding," Kaori admitted, calling it refinement when actually it was avoidance. With Etsuko's help, Kaori looked at the sculpture one more time and made a decision. She declared it complete as it was, not perfect, but real. She stopped working on it and arranged for its installation. When the sculpture was finally revealed in the city square, public response was mixed. Some people loved it. Others thought it was good, but not as exceptional as they'd expected from a decade of work. Critics noted both its strengths and its weaknesses. It was not a perfect masterpiece. It was a good sculpture with both beautiful passages and overworked areas, a real work rather than an ideal one. And Kaori found unexpected peace in this. The sculpture was done, installed, serving its purpose. It wasn't perfect, but it was complete. It had moved from endless potential to limited actuality, and this movement was itself a kind of perfection. Not the perfection of flawless execution, but the perfection of genuine completion. "I spent 10 years trying to make it perfect," Kaori told Isamu, standing together, looking at the installed sculpture. "I should have spent 3 years making it good, and then accepted that good was enough. The extra 7 years didn't make it better, they just delayed it." Isamu asked, "But how will you know with your next work? How will you know when to stop?" "I'll try to recognize when I'm working from love versus working from fear," Kaori said. "When I'm working from love, I'm responding to the actual piece, helping it become itself. When I'm working from fear, I'm trying to make it match an impossible ideal, trying to protect myself from criticism or judgment. The work from fear doesn't improve the piece. It just makes it tighter, more controlled, more dead." She touched a rough area of the sculpture that she had always intended to smooth further. "See this? For years I planned to refine it, but now I see it gives texture, life, contrast. My perfectionism wanted to eliminate it, but actually it's one of the better parts. Sometimes what we think is incomplete is actually just real, and real includes roughness, includes elements that don't match the ideal." In her remaining years, Kaori created several more sculptures, and each one she completed more quickly than the last. She learned to recognize the moment when a work was done, not perfect, but complete. She learned that completion meant allowing the work to be what it actually was, rather than endlessly pushing it toward what it might ideally be. "My final work taught me that sometimes completion means stopping, not finishing," she told students. "Sometimes good enough is actually excellent, because continuing would diminish rather than improve. Sometimes the work is done when you can let it go, not when it's perfect." Tonight, as you rest, you might consider what in your life needs completion rather than more refinement. What projects, relationships, phases, identities have you been endlessly working on, unable to declare them finished because they don't match your ideal? What would it mean to accept them as complete, as good enough, as done? Completion doesn't require perfection. It requires recognition that continuing is no longer serving the work or serving you. It requires courage to let the real thing exist, rather than protecting the imagined perfect thing by keeping it perpetually incomplete. Rest now in completion. Let yourself be done with some things, not because they're perfect, but because they're finished. Let yourself stop refining and start living with what actually is, rather than what might ideally be. The sculptor's final work teaches that holding on too long destroys as surely as letting go too early. Learn to recognize the difference, and then, when it's time, let go. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. In a garden temple, the monks kept a beautiful crane named Haku in a large bamboo enclosure. Haku had been brought to the temple as an injured chick, nursed back to health, and raised in the enclosure where he was safe from predators and provided with ample food. For 3 years, Haku lived comfortably in his bamboo home. The monks fed him daily, cleaned his space, and even spoke to him in gentle tones. He had everything a crane could need except freedom, though the monks assured themselves they were keeping him safe. One day, a traveling priest named Osho visited the temple and saw Haku in his enclosure. The priest noticed that Haku's wings had grown strong and full. He was clearly capable of flight, yet he never attempted to fly beyond the bamboo walls, even though portions of the enclosure were open to the sky. "Why doesn't your crane fly away?" Osho asked the monks. "He could if he wanted to," one monk replied. "We don't clip his wings." But he stays because he knows this is where his food comes, where he's safe, where he belongs. Osho watched Haku for several days. The crane would walk around his enclosure, occasionally stretching his wings, but never attempting actual flight. It was as if Haku had forgotten that flight was even possible, that his wings had any purpose beyond stretching. On his last day at the temple, Osho asked permission to enter Haku's enclosure. He approached the crane slowly, then suddenly clapped his hands and shouted, startling Haku into the air. The crane's wings opened instinctively, and for a moment, Haku was flying, truly flying, circling above the enclosure in surprise. But after only 2 circles, Haku landed back in his familiar corner, as if the brief flight had frightened rather than thrilled him. He settled back into his routine immediately, walking the same worn paths he always walked. The monks were angry. "You scared him! You could have hurt him!" "I showed him he could fly," Osho replied calmly, "but he chose to land." That choice tells me something important. Your crane is imprisoned not by bamboo walls, but by comfort. He could leave any time, but he won't, because the enclosure has become more familiar than freedom. He looked at the monks gathered around him. And before you judge Haku too harshly, ask yourselves, how are you different? How many of you are living in comfortable enclosures of your own making, never attempting to fly because the familiar is safer than the possible? One young monk, named Botan, was particularly struck by this question. He realized he had been at the temple for 5 years, had taken preliminary vows, but had never fully committed to the monastic life. He was comfortable in this in-between state, receiving the structure and security of monastery life without the full commitment it demanded. Like Haku, he had wings he never used. After Osho left, Botan couldn't stop thinking about the crane. He began to see Haku differently, not as a bird being kept safe, but as a bird being kept comfortable in a cage he could leave any time. And he began to see himself the same way. He started paying attention to all the ways the monastery had become his comfortable enclosure. He knew when every meal would come. He knew exactly what each day would bring. He had routines that felt safe, relationships that felt predictable, a life that felt controlled. And he realized this comfort was preventing him from attempting the flight that monastic life was actually meant to enable. The leap into full commitment, into genuine spiritual practice, into the risk and uncertainty that real transformation requires. "I've been living like Haku," Botan confessed to the abbot. "Safe and comfortable, but not really alive. Not really practicing, just walking the same familiar paths day after day." The abbot, who'd been troubled by Osho's words about the crane, nodded. "You're not alone." Many of us have made the monastery into a comfortable cage rather than a launching place. We've mistaken security for wisdom, routine for practice, comfort for peace. He gestured toward Haku's enclosure. The priest was right to startle the crane into flight, not to frighten him, but to remind him what his wings were for. Perhaps we all need to be startled sometimes, reminded that we have wings we're not using, capabilities we're not exercising, flights we're not attempting, because the ground feels safer. The monks began to look at their own lives with new eyes. They noticed patterns of comfortable avoidance, ways they stayed safely within self-imposed limits, flights they could attempt but didn't. The monastery, meant to be a place of transformation, had become for many a place of comfortable stagnation. Gradually, changes began to happen. Monks who had been avoiding difficult practices began to attempt them. Commitments that had been postponed were made. Risks that had seemed too frightening were taken. Not everyone changed. Some preferred the comfortable enclosure, but many discovered they had wings they had forgotten about. As for Haku, the monks began to encourage him to fly, taking him to open areas and gently startling him into the air. At first, he would fly only briefly before landing back in familiar territory, but eventually, his flights grew longer. One day, Haku flew beyond the temple grounds entirely and didn't return. The monks felt both loss and joy. They had loved having Haku, but they recognized that keeping him comfortable had been keeping him caged. Setting him free, truly free, not just free within limits, was the compassionate thing, even though it meant losing him. Botan, watching Haku disappear into the distance, felt inspired. If a crane can remember how to fly after 3 years of comfortable captivity, then surely I can remember what I came here to do. I've been in my bamboo enclosure long enough. He took his final vows that week, fully committing to monastic life. It was terrifying in a way his comfortable half-commitment had never been. But it was also exhilarating, like stretching wings he had forgotten he possessed. Years later, when Botan had become a teacher, he would often tell the story of Haku the crane. "We all build comfortable enclosures," he would say. "Relationships that feel safe but limit growth. Jobs that provide security but prevent exploration. Routines that feel comforting but cage us. The bamboo walls look like protection, but they're actually prevention, preventing us from discovering what we're capable of, from attempting flights we were made for." Students would ask, but how do we know when comfort has become a cage? When should we leave the enclosure? When you're walking the same paths day after day without growth, Botan would reply. When you've stopped even looking at the sky. When you've forgotten you have wings. When the thought of flying fills you with fear rather than excitement. These are signs that comfort has become captivity, that the safe enclosure has become a prison you don't recognize as a prison because it's comfortable. He would pause, then add, "The tragedy isn't being in the enclosure. The tragedy is forgetting you can leave, forgetting you were made for flight, forgetting that your wings have purpose beyond stretching." Haku lived 3 years in comfortable captivity before someone reminded him he could fly. How many years will you live in yours before you remember? Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own bamboo enclosure. What comfortable cage have you built for yourself? What safe patterns have you established that prevent growth? What flights are you not attempting because staying grounded feels safer? You have wings. You've always had wings. The question isn't whether you're capable of flight. You are. The question is whether you've become so comfortable with the ground that you've forgotten that the sky is where you belong. Whether the bamboo enclosure feels so safe that you've stopped noticing it's still an enclosure. Rest tonight with this awareness. Tomorrow, you could fly. You could attempt something that terrifies you. You could leave the comfortable patterns and risk the unknown. You could stretch your wings, not just as exercise, but as preparation for actual flight. The cage isn't locked. It never was. You've just been comfortable enough that you forgot to try the door. Sleep now and dream of flying. Let some part of you remember what your wings are for. And when you wake, maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready to find out what happens when you actually use them. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. In an ancient temple, there lived a cat named Tama, who seemed to do nothing but sleep in the sun. While monks meditated, Tama napped. While monks worked, Tama lounged. While monks studied, Tama groomed herself lazily. To visitors, the cat appeared to be a freeloader, enjoying the temple's hospitality while contributing nothing. A new abbot arrived at the temple, a young man named Ryokan, who believed in efficiency and purpose. He was troubled by the cat's apparent uselessness. "That cat does nothing," he complained to the senior monks. "She just sleeps and eats. Why do we keep her?" The senior monks smiled but said nothing. They had learned long ago that Tama's purpose wasn't obvious to everyone immediately. Ryokan decided the cat had to earn her keep. He began assigning her duties: chase mice in the storage rooms, patrol the gardens for pests, anything productive. But Tama ignored these assignments. She continued her routine of sleeping in sunny spots, occasionally stretching, maintaining her serene presence. Frustrated, Ryokan announced his intention to find the cat a new home. "We cannot justify feeding an animal that serves no purpose." That very night, as if to prove his point, mice invaded the temple's grain storage. Ryokan rushed to wake the cat, to put her to work catching these pests. But he couldn't find her. She wasn't in any of her usual sleeping spots. Then he heard it. A soft, steady purring coming from the storage room. He opened the door and found Tama sitting perfectly still in the center of the room. She wasn't chasing mice. She wasn't even moving. She was just sitting, present, alert, purring quietly. And there were no mice in the room. Ryokan could hear them in the walls, could hear them trying to enter, but none crossed the threshold where Tama sat. Her mere presence, her calm watchfulness, was keeping them at bay. She didn't need to chase them. She didn't need to kill them. She just needed to be there. Ryokan watched for over an hour. Tama never moved, never broke her meditation. She was like a guardian statue, her presence creating a boundary that mice instinctively wouldn't cross. Finally, as dawn approached, she stood, stretched, and calmly walked out of the storage room, heading for her favorite sunny spot. The senior monks found Ryokan standing in wonder. "She does have a purpose," he said quietly. "Yes," one of the senior monks replied, "but not the purpose you imagined. You wanted her to chase and hunt. You wanted visible action, measurable productivity. But Tama's gift is presence. She protects through being, not through doing. The mice sense a predator and stay away. She doesn't have to work hard. She just has to be what she is." Another monk added, "We tried to train cats before Tama. Cats that were energetic hunters, always chasing, always catching. But they disturbed the temple's peace. They left dead mice everywhere. They were exhausting to live with. Tama protects quietly, peacefully, just by being present. Her seeming laziness is actually perfect efficiency. Ryokan bowed to the cat, who had settled into a patch of morning sun and was already falling asleep. Forgive me, Tama. I judged your worth by my standards instead of understanding your actual purpose. From that day forward, Ryokan looked at everything in the temple differently. The old plum tree that no longer bore fruit he had planned to cut down. But the monks showed him how its branches were perfect for birds to nest in, how its shade cooled the meditation hall on summer days, how its twisted trunk was beautiful in a way that useful, productive trees never were. Its purpose wasn't production, its purpose was beauty and shelter. The ancient bell that was cracked and no longer rang clearly, he wanted to replace. But the monks explained that its imperfect tone was beloved, that its crack created a unique sound found nowhere else, and that generations of monks had learned to meditate to this particular tone. Its flaw was actually its distinction. The novice monk who seemed slow at learning, whom Ryokan had considered asking to leave, turned out to be extraordinarily patient with visitors, able to sit with grieving people for hours without becoming uncomfortable. His slowness at intellectual tasks was balanced by his gift for compassionate presence. I've been judging everything by a narrow standard, Ryokan confessed to the senior monks. Productivity, efficiency, obvious usefulness, but the temple isn't a business, it's an ecosystem. Everything has its place, its purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately obvious or doesn't fit conventional measures of value. He spent hours watching Tama, learning from her. She seemed to do nothing, yet her presence maintained order. She appeared lazy, yet she was perfectly alert when needed. She looked like a burden, yet she contributed essential value. She taught that being can be as important as doing, that presence can accomplish what action cannot, that some purposes are served by appearing purposeless. One day, a wealthy donor visited the temple and was offended to see a cat sleeping on expensive cushions in the main hall. Why do you allow this animal such privilege? She produces nothing. Ryokan smiled and told the story of Tama and the mice. She produces protection through presence. She contributes peace through her serene being. Her value can't be measured in conventional terms, but it's real and essential. She teaches us that purpose isn't always about production or visible action. Sometimes purpose is about simply being what you are, fully and completely in the right place. The donor looked skeptical, so Ryokan continued. You're a wealthy merchant. You measure value in terms of production, profit, and tangible results, but not everything valuable can be measured that way. How do you measure the worth of beauty, of peace, of a presence that prevents problems rather than solving them? Tama's purpose is subtle but essential. Without her, we would have chaos. With her, we have order. That she achieves this through napping rather than through frantic activity doesn't diminish her contribution. Years passed, and eventually Tama grew old and died. The monks gave her a funeral with full honors, acknowledging her years of service. They tried to find another cat to serve her function, but none could quite match her particular gift. Some cats were too aggressive, chasing everything and disturbing the peace. Others were too passive, failing to maintain the protective presence that Tama had embodied. Finally, they found a cat with Tama's quality, a calm, serene presence that protected through being rather than doing. This cat they named Tama II, and she took up residence in the sunny spots her predecessor had loved, continuing the tradition of purposeful purposelessness. Ryokan, now an old man himself, would often sit with the new Tama and remember the lessons the original had taught him. Every being has its place in the whole, he would tell young monks, but that place might not look like what we expect. Purpose isn't always about obvious productivity. Sometimes it's about being present, being yourself, contributing in ways that aren't measurable but are nonetheless essential. He would point to the sleeping cat. Tama teaches us not to judge too quickly, not to assess worth by narrow standards, not to dismiss what we don't immediately understand. She teaches us that the temple, like all of life, is an ecosystem where even the apparently useless serves a purpose, where presence matters as much as action, where being is as valuable as doing. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own purpose. Perhaps you've been judging yourself by standards that don't fit what you actually are. Perhaps you've been trying to be productive in ways that go against your nature. Perhaps you've been dismissing your own value because it doesn't fit conventional measures. What if your purpose, like Tama's, is partly about presence, about being what you are, where you are, contributing value that isn't always visible or measurable? What if your times of rest, of apparent inactivity, of just being present, are actually serving important purposes that busy productivity never could? You don't have to chase and hunt and constantly produce to have worth. Sometimes protection comes through peaceful presence. Sometimes order is maintained through calm being. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is rest completely, be present fully, and trust that your very existence contributes to the whole in ways you may never fully understand. Sleep now like Tama, knowing that even in sleeping, you serve a purpose. There was a young man named Koji whose father had died, leaving substantial debts. The creditors came to Koji expecting him to assume responsibility for his father's obligations. Koji, believing this was his duty as the son, worked himself nearly to death trying to repay the money his father had borrowed. For 3 years, Koji labored from dawn to dusk. He took multiple jobs, spent almost nothing on himself, and sent every coin he earned to his father's creditors. His health suffered. His youth was consumed by obligation. He became bitter and resentful, angry at his father for leaving him this burden. A traveling monk named Bankei came to the town and noticed Koji's exhaustion. He asked the young man why he looked so worn. "I'm repaying my father's debts," Koji explained. "He died owing money, and as his son, the responsibility falls to me." "Did you borrow this money?" Bankei asked. "No, my father did." "Did you receive any benefit from what the money purchased?" "No, he borrowed it for his gambling and drinking." "Then why are you repaying it?" Koji looked at the monk in confusion. "Because I'm his son. Because the creditors say I must. Because it's my duty." Bankei shook his head gently. "You can choose to repay debts that aren't yours. That's your choice, but understand that you're choosing it, not that you must do it. Your father's choices were his own. His debts were his own. They died with him. The creditors may pressure you, society may tell you it's your obligation, but actually you're free. You've been carrying a burden that was never yours to carry. Koji felt anger rise in him. So I should just abandon my father's debts? That would dishonor his memory. Is working yourself to death to pay for his gambling honoring his memory? Bankei asked quietly. Or is it perpetuating the harm he caused? Your father made choices that hurt himself and others. You don't honor him by destroying yourself for those choices. You honor him by living differently, by not continuing the cycle of harm. This conversation shook something loose in Koji. He had never questioned the assumption that his father's debts were now his. Everyone had told him this was his duty, and he had accepted it without examination. He began asking questions. Legally, were his father's debts actually his responsibility? He discovered they were not. The creditors had relied on his sense of filial duty and his ignorance of his legal rights. He had been free all along, but hadn't known it. Koji stopped making payments on his father's debts. The creditors threatened and complained, but they had no legal claim on him. He used his labor now to build his own life, to recover his health, to create a future not defined by his father's mistakes. Some people in the village criticized him. He abandoned his father's debts, they whispered. He has no filial piety. But Bankei, before leaving town, gave Koji final words of wisdom. Carrying debts that aren't yours doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you a volunteer victim. Your father's poor choices created consequences. Those consequences were his to face, not yours to inherit. You can feel compassion for him without taking on burdens that aren't yours. You can love someone without destroying yourself for their mistakes. Years later, when Koji had built a successful life and even helped others in his community who were struggling, someone asked him, "Don't you feel guilty for not repaying your father's debts?" "No," Koji replied. "I felt guilty for years while I was killing myself trying to repay them. But the guilt was about other people's expectations, not about actual obligation. My father's debts were his own. His choices were his own. I honor his memory better by living well and helping others than I would by destroying myself for mistakes I didn't make." Tonight, what debts are you carrying that were never yours? What burdens did you inherit from parents, from past relationships, from circumstances beyond your control? What shame or obligation have you assumed just because someone told you that you must? You're allowed to put these down. You're allowed to say, "This was never mine to carry." The debts of others, the mistakes of the past, the expectations of people who had no right to place them on you. None of these are truly yours, unless you choose to make them so. Rest tonight in freedom from all inherited burdens. You're responsible for your own choices, not for everyone else's. Let the dead bury the dead. Let old debts stay where they belong. You're free. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. In a mountain monastery, there was a pond that perfectly reflected the sky above it. At night, when the moon was full, there would appear to be two moons, one in the sky and one in the water. A young monk named Daiki was troubled by this. "Which is the real moon?" he would ask. "The one in the sky or the one in the water?" The other monks would laugh. "Obviously the one in the sky is real. The one in the water is just a reflection. But Daiki wasn't satisfied with this answer. He would sit by the pond for hours, watching both moons. The moon in the water was just as bright, just as beautiful, just as present to his vision as the moon in the sky. In what sense was it less real? He asked his teacher, Master Hakuin, "If I can see the moon in the water, if it affects me just as much as the moon in the sky, how is it not real?" Hakuin smiled. "Touch the moon in the sky." "I can't. It's too far away." "Touch the moon in the water!" Daiki reached toward the pond, but as his hand approached the water, the moon's reflection rippled and fragmented. "I can't touch that one either." "Then in what way is one more real than the other?" Hakuin asked. "Both exist in your experience. Both affect you. Both are impossible to grasp. What makes you think reality and reflection are different things?" This question opened something in Daiki's understanding. He had been taught to distinguish between real and reflected, original and copy, substance and shadow. But his experience didn't support these neat distinctions. When he looked at the moon in the water, he really saw it. The experience of seeing it was real, even if what he was seeing was a reflection. When he felt moved by its beauty, the emotion was real, regardless of whether he was looking at the original or the reflection. His life, his experience, his feelings, all of these were happening in response to both moons equally. He began to wonder about other reflections in his life. When he thought about his deceased mother, was he experiencing his actual mother, or just a memory, a reflection of who she had been? Yet his love for her was real. His grief was real. The way she had shaped him was real. Did it matter that he could only access a reflection of her, not her actual presence? When he read teachings from ancient masters, was he experiencing their actual wisdom or just reflections of it, filtered through translation and time and his own interpretation? Yet the teachings affected him, changed him, helped him. The reflections had real power. When he practiced meditation and caught glimpses of what the teachings called his true nature, was he experiencing the actual thing or just reflections of it in his limited consciousness? Yet whatever he was experiencing, it was transforming his life. One evening, Daiki sat by the pond with Master Hakuin, watching the two moons. "Master," Daiki said, "I think I've been making a mistake. I've been trying to distinguish between the real and the reflected, but everything I experience is in some sense a reflection. I never touch reality directly. I only experience reflections of it in my consciousness, interpretations of it through my senses, and understanding. If I dismiss all reflections as unreal, I dismiss my entire life." Hakuin nodded. "This is a good understanding. The question isn't whether something is real or reflected. The question is whether you're aware that you're looking at a reflection, or whether you mistake the reflection for the only reality." He pointed at the moon in the water. "The danger isn't in seeing this moon. The danger is in thinking this is the only moon, in believing that your reflection of reality is reality itself. But if you know you're seeing a reflection, if you remain aware that there's something beyond what you can directly experience, then the reflection serves its purpose. It points you toward what it reflects." Over the following months, Daiki deepened this understanding. He learned to appreciate reflections without mistaking them for the whole truth. He could love his memory of his mother while knowing it was a reflection of her, not her actual presence. He could value teachings while knowing they were fingers pointing at truth, not truth itself. He could work with his experiences in meditation while knowing they were reflections of his true nature, not the full reality of it. He found this understanding incredibly freeing. He no longer needed to grasp the ungraspable or fully understand the incomprehensible. He could work with reflections, learn from them, be transformed by them, without needing them to be more than what they were. One day, a new student came to the monastery and asked Daiki the same question he had once asked. Which moon is real, the one in the sky or the one in the water? Daiki smiled, remembering his own confusion. Both are real, he replied. One is the original, one is the reflection. But your experience of both is real. The light from the sky moon and the light from the water moon both enter your eyes. Both create responses in your consciousness. Both affect you. The only difference is that you can't directly touch either one, and one will remain even if you disturb the water. He looked at the two moons thoughtfully. Most of what we call our life is reflection. Reflection of the past in memory. Reflection of reality in consciousness. Reflection of truth in words and concepts. We live in a world of reflections. This isn't a problem unless we forget that they're reflections. Then we start fighting about whose reflection is most accurate, claiming our interpretation is the only real one, trying to grasp what can't be grasped. The new student asked, "So, how should we relate to reflections?" "Appreciate them," Daiki replied. "Learn from them. Be transformed by them, but hold them lightly. Know that they point to something beyond themselves. The moon in the water shows you where to look for the moon in the sky. Your experiences point you toward the truth beyond experience. Your understanding reflects reality, but isn't identical to reality. This awareness keeps you humble and keeps you seeking." Years later, when Daiki became a teacher, he would often bring students to the pond on full moon nights. He would have them look at both moons and ask, "Which is real?" Some students would confidently say the sky moon was real and the water moon was just a reflection. Daiki would ask them, "Then why can you see them both equally well? Why does the water moon move you just as much as the sky moon?" Other students, trying to be clever, would say both were real. Daiki would ask them, "Then why does one remain when you throw a stone in the water and the other doesn't?" A few students would grow quiet, realizing the question itself was based on assumptions that didn't hold up under examination. These were the students Daiki knew were ready for deeper teaching. The question which is real assumes reality and reflection are opposites, he would tell these students. But actually, reflection is a form of reality. It's a real reflection, a real experience, a real perception. The problem isn't with reflection itself. The problem is when we mistake partial reflection for complete reality. When we think our limited experience encompasses the whole truth. When we cling to our interpretations as if they were the things themselves. He would point at the two moons. Your life is like looking at these moons. You're always experiencing reflections, never the thing itself. You reflect reality through your senses, your consciousness, your understanding. This reflection is a real experience. It shapes you, teaches you, transforms you. But it's not the whole story. Stay aware of this. Appreciate your reflections. Learn from them. but don't mistake them for the unreflected reality. One student asked, "Will we ever experience unreflected reality? Will we ever see beyond reflection?" Daiki was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Perhaps in death, perhaps in enlightenment, perhaps never. I don't know, but I know this. The effort to see beyond reflection is itself valuable. The awareness that we're experiencing reflection keeps us humble, keeps us seeking, keeps us from absolutizing our limited perspectives. And sometimes, in rare moments of clarity, the reflection becomes so perfect, so transparent, that the distinction between reflected and unreflected almost disappears. Those moments of clarity are themselves gifts of the reflective nature of consciousness. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider that your entire experience right now is a reflection. These words are reflections of ideas. Your understanding of them is a reflection of the words. Your sense of yourself is a reflection of something deeper. Your thoughts are reflections of the underlying mental activity you don't directly experience. Everything you know comes to you as a reflection. This doesn't make your experience less real. It makes it what it is, a real experience of reflected reality. You're seeing the moon in the water, and that seeing is genuine, even if what you're seeing is a reflection. Let this understanding help you hold everything a bit more lightly tonight. Your worries are reflections of possible futures. Your regrets are reflections of the past. Your sense of who you are is a reflection of something deeper and more mysterious than you can fully know. All of these reflections are real experiences, but they are not the whole truth. Rest in the understanding that you live in a world of reflections, and that's actually okay. You don't need to grasp the ungraspable or fully understand the mystery. You can appreciate the moon in the water without needing to hold the moon in the sky. You can live with reflections, learn from them, be moved by them, without mistaking them for everything that is. Both moons are beautiful. Both are real in their own way. And you, experiencing both, are having a real experience of something that transcends both. Rest in that paradox tonight. Rest in reflection. Rest in the mystery of experiencing what you can never fully grasp. It's enough. It's always been enough. The reflection of peace is peaceful. The reflection of rest is restful. You don't need the original when the reflection serves you so well. Sleep now, watching both moons, knowing both are real and neither is everything. That's the truth. That's enough. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. In a monastery nestled between two mountains, there lived a young monk named Koji who took his responsibilities with tremendous seriousness. Each morning before dawn, he was assigned the task of sweeping the courtyard, and he approached this simple chore as if the monastery's very survival depended on it. Koji would begin his work with fierce determination, moving in perfectly straight lines from one end of the courtyard to the other. His broom strokes were methodical, precise, leaving no stone unswept. He would work for hours, his jaw clenched with concentration, his movements sharp and controlled. But the courtyard sat beneath an ancient cherry tree, and the tree had its own ideas about cleanliness. Even as Koji swept, new leaves would drift down, landing exactly where he had just cleaned. The The wind would scatter dust across his perfectly swept paths. Birds would drop small twigs and seeds onto the stones. Each new bit of debris felt like a personal insult to Koji. He would rush to sweep it up, only to see 3 more leaves fall behind him. His sweeping became more frantic, more desperate. He began waking earlier and earlier, trying to finish before the wind picked up, before the birds became active, before new leaves could fall. The other monks noticed Koji's growing exhaustion. They saw the tension in his shoulders, the frustration etched across his young face. But they said nothing. This was between Koji and his teacher, Master Tenzin. Master Tenzin had been watching his students struggle for several weeks. He saw how Koji was making himself miserable over a courtyard that would never stay perfectly clean. Could never stay perfectly clean, was not meant to stay perfectly clean. One morning, as Koji was finishing his 3rd hour of sweeping, his movements now mechanical and joyless, Master Tenzin appeared beside him. "Why do you sweep in straight lines?" the master asked, his voice mild, curious. Koji stopped, surprised by the question. "Because that's the most efficient way to cover the ground, master. Straight lines ensure I don't miss any area." "I see," Tenzin nodded thoughtfully. "And how is that working for you?" Koji wanted to say it was working fine, but honesty prevented him. "I can never seem to finish, master. As soon as I clean one section, another becomes dirty. The courtyard is never completely perfect." Tenzin made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been something else entirely. "Today, try something different. Sweep in circles instead." "Circles?" Koji couldn't hide his confusion. "But that's inefficient. Circles will overlap. I'll sweep the same areas multiple times. It doesn't make sense." "Try it anyway," Tenzin said gently. "Just for today. Sweep in circles and see what happens." Koji wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the logical reasons why circular sweeping was inferior to his systematic approach. But one did not argue with Master Tenzin. So he adjusted his grip on the broom and began to sweep in a large, slow circle. At first it felt wrong. His mind kept trying to straighten his path, to make it more efficient, more logical. But he continued, one circular sweep after another, round and round the courtyard. Something unexpected began to happen. Without the pressure to move in straight lines, to cover ground efficiently, to finish a measurable task, Koji's body started to relax. The circular motion became almost meditative, like a moving meditation. He noticed things he had missed during weeks of intense, focused sweeping. The way morning light caught the edges of wet stones, the sound his broom made, a soft whisper against the ground, the coolness of the air before the sun rose fully, the scent of cherry blossoms from the tree above. When a leaf fell in front of him, he swept it into his circle naturally. It became part of the dance rather than an interruption to his task. When the wind scattered dust behind him, he simply came round to it again on his next pass, unhurried, untroubled. After an hour of circular sweeping, Koji stopped and looked around. The courtyard wasn't perfectly clean. It couldn't be, but it was clean enough. It was cared for. And most surprisingly, Koji himself felt peaceful for the first time in weeks. Master Tenzin returned, as if he had known exactly when Koji would understand. "Well?" the master asked. "I don't understand," Koji admitted. "The courtyard isn't any cleaner than when I swept in straight lines. In fact, by logical measurement, it might be less clean, but somehow it feels right. What changed? Tenzin asked. Koji thought carefully. I stopped trying to finish. Circles have no end point, so I couldn't race toward completion. I was just sweeping, being present with the broom, the stones, the leaves. The work itself became the point, not the finished product. And I realized the courtyard was never meant to be perfectly clean. It's outside, under a tree, in the world. Leaves will fall, wind will blow. This is natural, this is right. I was fighting against nature itself, trying to impose a perfection that doesn't exist. Tenzin smiled, the kind of smile that seemed to light up from somewhere deep inside. For weeks, you've been at war with this courtyard, at war with leaves, at war with wind, at war with imperfection. How did that feel? Exhausting, Master. I was miserable. And now? Koji looked down at his broom, at the courtyard with its scattered leaves and imperfect stones. Now I understand that I'm not here to create perfection. I'm here to care for something that will never be perfect. And that's okay. That's actually the point. From that day forward, Koji swept in circles. Other monks noticed the change in him. Where once he had been tight and tense, now he seemed relaxed. Where once his sweeping had been grim duty, now it seemed almost like a dance. Students would sometimes ask him, "Isn't circular sweeping inefficient?" And Koji would smile and reply, "It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to achieve perfect cleanliness, then yes, it's inefficient. You'll fail either way, but you'll be miserable failing. If you're trying to be present, to care for something without attachment to perfect outcomes, then circles are the most efficient path of all." Years later, when Koji became a teacher himself, he would always observe how new students approached their tasks. When he saw someone fighting against imperfection, making themselves miserable in pursuit of an impossible standard, he would suggest they try moving in circles for a while. Perfection is a straight line that doesn't exist, he would tell them. But presence, care, acceptance, these are circles that spiral deeper and deeper into understanding. Don't fight against the nature of things. Work with it. Dance with it. Sweep in circles until you understand that the imperfect is already perfect, exactly as it is. As you rest tonight, you might consider this teaching. Where in your life are you sweeping in rigid straight lines, exhausting yourself trying to achieve a perfection that doesn't exist? What would happen if you moved in circles instead? If you let go of the end point and simply engaged fully with the present moment, imperfection and all. The courtyard of your life will never be perfectly clean. Leaves will fall. Wind will blow. This is not failure. This is life. And when you stop fighting against it, when you sweep in circles with presence and care, you might discover that what you thought was imperfect was actually complete all along. On the coast of a small fishing village, there lived an old fisherman named Takeshi who had cast his nets into the sea for more than 50 years. While other fishermen in the village would return each day with boats full of fish, Takeshi's catch was often modest. Yet he seemed more content than any of them, humming to himself as he mended his nets, smiling at the horizon as if it were an old friend. The other fishermen couldn't understand it. They had newer boats, stronger nets, better equipment. They worked longer hours, went farther out to sea. employed every technique they knew to maximize their catch. Yet they always seemed worried. Worried about competition, worried about the weather, worried about next season, worried about whether they were catching enough. One day, a young fisherman named Hiro, ambitious and frustrated by his own mediocre catches despite his hard work, approached Takeshi as the old man sat mending his net on the dock. "Old uncle," Hiro said, using the term of respect though they weren't related. "May I ask you something?" Takeshi looked up, his weathered face crinkling into a smile. "Of course, young one. Sit." Hiro sat beside him, watching the old man's gnarled fingers work the net with practiced ease. "How do you stay so peaceful? Your catch is often smaller than ours, yet you never seem worried. You never seem to be rushing or striving. What is your secret?" Takeshi held up a section of his net, spreading it between his hands so the light came through the gaps. "Tell me, Hiro, what is a net made of?" Hiro looked at the net, confused by the simple question. "Rope, I suppose. Woven rope with knots." "Look closer," Takeshi said, shaking the net gently. "What else do you see?" Hiro studied it more carefully. The rope formed a pattern, yes, but between each strand. "Holes," he said. "The net is full of holes." "Exactly," Takeshi said, his eyes twinkling. "A net is more hole than rope, yes. The holes are what make it a net. Without the holes, it would just be a sheet of cloth, useless for catching fish." "I don't understand what this has to do with my question." Takeshi set down the net and looked out at the water. "When I was young, like you, I wanted to catch every fish in the sea. I would cast my net and then grip the rope so tightly, pulling hard, afraid that fish would escape. My hands would bleed from holding so tight. My arms would ache from pulling so hard. And you know what happened?" "What?" "The fish would sense the violence of it, the desperation. The net would move through the water roughly, and fish would avoid it. Or they would escape through holes that my tight gripping actually made larger. The harder I tried to hold everything, the more I lost." Hiro leaned forward, interested now. "One day," Takeshi continued, "I was very tired. My hands hurt. My heart hurt from constant worry. I cast my net almost carelessly, too exhausted to grip tight, too worn out to pull hard. I just let the net sink naturally, let the current move it gently, and pulled it back with soft hands. And that day, my catch was the best I'd ever had." "I don't see how that's possible," Hiro said. "If you don't hold tight, won't everything escape?" Takeshi picked up the net again. "Watch." He held one section very tightly in his fist. "When I clench like this, look what happens to the net. The holes close up, the rope bunches. The net becomes smaller, more rigid. Now watch." He opened his hand, holding the net loosely across his palm. "See? The holes open, the net expands. It becomes larger, more flexible. It can hold more because I'm holding it less." He let the net rest on his lap and looked at Hiro with those eyes that had seen half a century of sunrises over water. "This is true for fish, and it's true for everything else in life. The tighter we grip, the more we lose. The more desperately we hold on, the more brittle things become. But when we hold loosely, gently, with open hands, things stay naturally." "But isn't that risky?" Hiro asked. "What if everything falls through?" What is falling through right now? Takeshi asked gently. You have a boat. You have nets. You have your health. You have this sea. What exactly are you afraid of losing that you don't already risk losing by worrying about it constantly? Hiro had no answer. He realized he spent so much energy protecting what he had, so much effort trying to guarantee future security, that he was exhausted and unhappy even though nothing had actually gone wrong yet. I see in you what I was, Takeshi said. You grip your life with tight fists. Your boat, your catch, your reputation, your future. You're trying to hold all of it so tightly that your hands hurt and your heart is tired. But you cannot control the sea. You cannot control the fish. You cannot control tomorrow. The only thing your tight grip accomplishes is making you suffer today. So what should I do? Hiro asked. Cast your net with care, but without desperation. Pull it back with attention, but without force. Let the sea be the sea. Let the fish be the fish. Do your work, do it well, but hold the results loosely. Some days the catch will be good, some days it will be modest, some days the net will come back empty. All of this is part of fishing, part of life. When you stop fighting against this truth, when you stop gripping so tightly, something relaxes. And often, that's when everything you need comes naturally. Hiro sat with this teaching for a long time, watching the waves, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. He thought about how tightly he had been holding everything in his life, his ambitions, his worries, his plans, his fears. His whole body ached from the effort of it. The next morning, when Hiro went out to fish, he tried something different. He cast his net with the same care as always, but without the desperate energy he usually brought. He didn't clench the ropes. He didn't pull with all his might. He simply allowed the net to do what a net does, and he guided it gently back to the boat. His catch that day wasn't dramatically bigger, but he noticed something else. The work felt easier. His shoulders didn't ache as much. His mind wasn't churning with anxiety. And when some fish escaped through the holes, which they always did, which they always would, he didn't feel it as a personal failure. It was just fish being fish. Over time, Hiro's entire approach to fishing changed. And gradually, his entire approach to life changed with it. He held his plans more loosely. He gripped his expectations less tightly. He let people in his life be who they were without trying to control them. He stopped trying to grip the future with tight fists. Years later, young fishermen would come to Hiro, asking the same question he had once asked Takeshi, and he would show them a net, spreading it in the light, teaching them about the holes that make it work. Life is like this net, he would say. It's mostly empty space, mostly things we cannot hold or control. And that's not a problem. That's what makes it work. Hold everything loosely, your work, your relationships, your achievements, your plans. Hold them with care, yes, but without that desperate grip that closes up the holes and makes everything smaller, harder, more brittle. Open your hands. Let life flow through them. You'll lose some things, yes, but you'll find you can hold so much more when you stop holding so tightly. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, you might notice where you're gripping too tightly. What are you holding with clenched fists? What are you trying to control that cannot be controlled? What would happen if you opened your hands just a little and held everything more gently? The net of your life is mostly holes, mostly space, mostly mystery. This is not a flaw in the design. This is what makes it work. Hold it loosely. Let the holes be holes. Let some things escape. You cannot catch everything, and you were never meant to. But what stays when you hold it gently stays because it wants to, not because you forced it. And that makes all the difference. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. In a mountain monastery, there hung an ancient bronze bell in the temple courtyard. For 300 years, this bell had marked the rhythms of monastic life, calling monks to meditation at dawn, to meals at midday, to evening prayers as the sun set behind the peaks. Its deep, resonant tone could be heard throughout the valley, a voice of bronze that spoke of continuity, of tradition, of the sacred order of things. The monastery's youngest monk, a boy named Jiro, who had arrived only months before, had never known silence. He had grown up in a busy city where noise was constant. Street vendors calling, cartwheels clattering, neighbors arguing, merchants haggling, temple bells of a dozen different shrines all competing to be heard. When he came to the monastery, that single bell had seemed like a blessing. Just one sound, pure and clear, marking time with dignity. But Jiro took the bell for granted. He had heard it so many times that he no longer really heard it at all. It was just background, just part of the environment, no more remarkable than the sound of wind or the call of birds. When it rang for dawn meditation, he would stumble from his sleeping mat, still half asleep. When it rang for meals, he was often already hungry and irritated by the wait. The bell was just a signal, a command, nothing more. One autumn, the monastery's abbot, a man named Eshun, who rarely spoke but seemed to notice everything, made an unusual decision. Without explanation or announcement, he ordered that the bell should not be rung. Not for one day, but indefinitely. The bell ringer, a senior monk who had performed this duty for 20 years, looked confused but obeyed. The next morning, Jiro woke in darkness, unsure of the time. He lay there waiting for the familiar sound that would tell him dawn had arrived, that it was time to rise, time to begin the day. But no sound came. He waited longer, growing anxious. Had he somehow slept through it? Was he late? Would he be in trouble? Finally, he stumbled out into the courtyard and found other monks there, all looking similarly confused. Some had woken too early and been waiting. Others, like Jiro, had woken late, uncertain. Master Eshun appeared and said only, "No bell today. Perhaps no bell tomorrow. We shall see. Now please sit for meditation." They sat, but Jiro found it almost impossible to concentrate. He kept listening for the bell. His body expected it. His mind waited for it. Even though he knew it wouldn't ring, he couldn't stop anticipating its sound. The silence where the bell should have been was louder than the bell itself had ever been. At midday, there was no bell to call them to their meal. Some monks arrived too early and had to wait. Others came too late and found the food already distributed. The careful rhythm of the day, which had been marked by the bell for 300 years, had suddenly disappeared. Time became elastic, uncertain, strange. Evening came with no bell to mark the day's transition into night. Jiro sat in the courtyard, looking at the bell hanging silent in its wooden frame. He had passed this bell dozens of times each day for months. But he realized now that he had never really looked at it. Now, in its silence, he saw it clearly for the first time. He noticed the beautiful patina of the bronze, the way 3 centuries of weather had given it a green-black color that seemed to hold depth, like looking into deep water. He saw the intricate decorations cast into its surface, dragons and lotus flowers, and Sanskrit characters worn smooth by time. He noticed how the bell hung perfectly balanced, how the slightest touch would set it swinging, ready to speak at any moment, but choosing silence instead. Days passed, then weeks. The monks adapted to life without the bell. They learned to sense the time from the light, from the position of shadows, from the feeling in their own bodies. They became more attentive to natural rhythms, rather than relying on the bronze voice to tell them what to do. But something else happened too. The bell's absence created a different kind of presence. Monks found themselves thinking about it constantly. The silence, where the bell should have been, became a teaching in itself. One evening, Jiro approached Master Eshun in the garden. "Master," he said, bowing, "may I ask why the bell no longer rings?" Eshun looked up from the herbs he was tending. "Does it not ring? Or do you finally hear it?" Jiro frowned, confused. "I hear nothing, Master. That's the problem. The bell is silent." "Sit," Eshun said, gesturing to the ground beside him. Jiro sat. "When the bell rang every day," Eshun said, "did you hear it?" "Of course, Master. We all heard it." "Did you really?" "Tell me about the sound. Describe it to me." Jiro opened his mouth and found he couldn't. He had heard the bell hundreds of times, but he couldn't describe its tone, its resonance, its particular voice. He had heard it so often that he had stopped actually listening. "You heard the command," Eshun said gently. "Wake up. Come here. Do this. But did you hear the bell itself? Did you appreciate its voice? Did you feel gratitude for its faithful service? Or had it become invisible to you, just part of the background noise of your life?" Jiro felt something catch in his throat. The master was right. He had taken the bell completely for granted. "Now," Eshun continued, "now that it's silent, you think about it constantly. You notice it. You see it hanging there. You appreciate what it was. The absence has taught you to see what presence never could. This is why the bell is silent. Not because I wanted to take it away from you, but because I wanted to give it back to you. Sometimes we must lose something to truly find it." Jiro looked at the bell hanging in the courtyard, silhouetted against the darkening sky. He understood now. When the bell rang, it was just a tool, just a function. But in its silence, it had become a teacher. "There is another lesson here," Eshun said, standing up and brushing dirt from his robes. "We spend our lives filling every moment with sound, with activity, with doing. We are afraid of silence, afraid of absence, afraid of empty space. But silence teaches, absence reveals. The spaces between notes are what make music music. The pauses between words are what make speech meaningful. The rest between breaths is what makes breathing possible." He started walking toward the temple, then paused and looked back at Jiro. "The bell will ring again someday. But when it does, I hope you will hear it differently. I hope you will hear not just the sound, but the silence it emerges from. Not just the command it carries, but the gift it offers. And I hope you will remember that sometimes the deepest teaching comes not from what is present, but from what is absent. That night, lying on his sleeping mat, Jiro listened to the silence where the bell should have been. But it wasn't really silence, he realized. He could hear wind moving through trees. He could hear his own breathing. He could hear the small sounds of the monastery settling into sleep. These sounds had always been there, but the bell had covered them. Its absence revealed a whole world of subtle sound he had never noticed. 3 months later, on the first morning of winter, Master Ishan gave the signal. The bell rang again. The sound that rolled across the courtyard was the most beautiful thing Jiro had ever heard. It was deep and rich and full of resonance. It spoke of time and patience and faithful service. It spoke of continuity and change. It spoke of presence and absence, sound and silence, all woven together. Tears came to Jiro's eyes as he listened. He wasn't crying from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of finally, truly hearing something he had taken for granted for so long. From that day forward, every time the bell rang, Jiro would pause, really pause, and listen. And in listening to the bell, he learned to listen to everything more deeply. He learned that things reveal themselves most fully when we risk losing them. He learned that absence can be a kind of presence. He learned that what we take for granted becomes invisible until it's taken away. Years later, when Jiro became the bell ringer himself, he would sometimes let a full day pass in silence, just as Master Eshan had done. The younger monks would complain, would feel lost without their marker, their signal, their command. And Jiro would smile, remembering his own confusion, his own eventual understanding. The bell is always teaching, he would tell them, in sound and in silence, in presence and in absence. When you learn to hear both, you begin to understand that they are not opposites, but partners in the same dance. As you settle into rest tonight, you might notice what's absent from this moment. Not in a sad way, but with curiosity. What sounds are you not hearing? What worries are not present right now? What problems are not demanding your attention in this very instant? Absence has gifts to offer. The space where sound isn't is what makes sound possible. The silence where words aren't is what makes words meaningful. The emptiness where thought isn't is what makes awareness possible. Let yourself rest in what's not here, not as loss, but as space. Empty space, silent space, open space. And in that space, you might discover a presence more profound than anything that makes noise or demands attention. You might discover that sometimes the deepest teaching, the deepest rest, the deepest peace comes not from adding something, but from letting something fall away. The bell is silent now, and in that silence, everything speaks. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.